across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Good morning and welcome to Morning Glory. 2 minutes past 6, I'm Mike Graham. It might be dark, it might be cold, it might be winter, it might be in the throes of all sorts of terrible things out there weather-wise. You might have to get up this early to get your kids to school. You might be waking up just because you want to. You might be going out for your constitution, or the dog might be barking and telling you what's its breakfast. I, however, need no such admissions from you. All you have to do is listen and watch Morning Glory, because we are the home of common sense. We're going to bring you all the news that you need to know about. We're going to bring you some stories that you didn't even think you needed to know about, and we're going to be bringing you some opinions that you won't hear anywhere else. Why? Because we are, of course, Talk right here. We've been here for a long time, and we will continue to be here for a long time. A bit like Rachel Reeves, really. Do you think that Rachel Reeves will be here in time for the next government? I'm very, very happy with what Rachel Reeves is doing. If I asked you, Peter Blexley, the man who is sitting opposite me, Peter Blexley, are you likely to be still with your wife in the coming years, or can you give us any assurance that she will not be leaving you?
I sincerely hope that I am with my wife for many, many years to come, because it is the single most wonderful thing about my life.
Yes. There you go. Thank you very much indeed. So she's leaving tomorrow. That's what it sounds like. Rachel Reeves, same story. You know, every time Keir Starmer says anything, and let's not forget, he was yesterday up there pulling himself up to his full height of 5'4.5", basically telling everyone that Rachel Reeves is doing a great job, and there's absolutely no reason to think that she wouldn't be sitting here in the Chancellor's seat this time next year, or indeed the year after. He made such a hack of it that the Downing Street had to issue a proper announcement later on in the afternoon, some hours later, to assure everybody that he didn't mean that she was leaving. He didn't mean not to give her a vote of confidence. He didn't mean to give her the old, you know, the club has the full confidence of the management and the management has the full confidence of the directors and all the rest of it, like the football analogy. But anyway, let's have a listen to how Keir Starmer delivered his AI genius speech, because AI is going to save the world, apparently. Here he goes.
And as well as Matt, I'm delighted that the inspiring Nobel Peace Nobel Prize winner.
the Mobile Peace Prize. And why can't he speak? He's the Prime Minister. He's meant to be a barrister. He's supposed to be trained in public speaking. Should we have that again? The Mobile Peace Prize. Come on.
And as well as Matt, I'm delighted that the inspiring Nobel Peace Nobel Prize winner.
I'm delighted. He sounds like Prince Charles, doesn't he, when he was Prince Charles, before he was King Charles. I don't know what's going on. Anyway, listen, we'll be talking an awful lot about Keir Starmer and AI, and, of course, the fact that down the pub, you won't be able to say what you think anymore, because the Labour government wants to bring in a rule that will actually hamper your free speech. You won't be able to ask anybody anything interesting, or you won't be able to tell any bad jokes either, even if they're about the Mobile Peace Prize. This is Morning Glory. We've got lots more coming up, and here it is. Unbelievable stuff. Very good morning to you, Peter Blexley. How are you?
Good morning, Governor. I'm very well, thank you.
Good to see you. I mean, all I can say is the best headline this morning, I think, is the Daily Mail, which says, 2 lame ducks. They've got a picture of Rachel Reeves on the front. She'll be arriving at an airport anytime soon to see that on the front pages. Treasury in turmoil as the pound takes another battery. The pound is at its lowest against the dollar and the euro now since, I think, the last century. The Prime Minister scrambles to shore up his flailing Chancellor and is forced to declare full confidence in her scandal-hit deputy. You will know, of course, from your time in the football world, being a fan of many years of QPR, whenever the management is given the full backing and confidence of the directors, that usually signals the beginning of the end, doesn't it?
Yeah, whenever the chairman of a football club says the manager has our full backing, you need to rush down the bookies and lay a bet that they're going to get sacked within the next week.
Sacked in the morning.
Because that is invariably what happens. Yeah, I mean, when you look at these two, I mean, they occupy senior positions in this government.
The other one, of course, being Tulip Siddiq, the bizarrely named anti-corruption minister, who appears to be embroiled in an awful lot of corruption in Bangladesh.
And works within the same department as Rachel Reeves.
Of course.
Yeah. And you look at the two of them, on the front page of the Mail today, and you just think, is this the top talent that this government has to offer?
This is the best they could get.
Because clearly it is.
Yeah.
And therefore, we're in shtuck. Deep shtuck.
We are in a bad place. I mean, the markets are literally collapsing around us, you know, because people in finance, and I know lots of people that work in finance, the one thing they're very good at is basically seeing an opportunity and going for it. And they don't care about, you know, the welfare of Britain. They don't care about whether or not you and I are going to have to stump up some more taxes. What they care about is making a profit. And when they see, you know, an injured animal on the floor, they send the vultures down to pick it up and eat it. And that's what they're doing. And they're absolutely eating the hell out of Rachel Reeves' animal.
And should anybody have the good fortune to be jetting off for a bit of winter sun in the next few weeks, I can guarantee you, when you go and exchange your cash or you pay by card for whatever foreign currency it is, you will receive a lot less this week than you would have done last week.
I think you get £1.24 for the dollar. You got, well, sorry, $1.24 for a pound, which is pretty bleeding low. I mean, I lived in America when it got down to parity, you know, and that was back in the 1980s when a dollar and the pound were more or less the same, because that was during the whole time of Black Friday and Black Wednesday and, you know, the exchange rate mechanism and all the rest of it, and Nigel Lawson and the collapse of the British economy. And this is the same, we're going the same way.
I think it's fair to say, without fear of contradiction, although there will be some clowns who will try to do that, but to put it in a nutshell, this Labour government couldn't run a bath.
They really couldn't. They are so bad. Let's have a look at Keir Starmer yesterday. So he was making this big set-piece speech, which a lot of people said, why is he making a set-piece speech about AI when there's so many other problems? The economy is down the gurgler, as we've said. You know, Rachel Reeves is away in China. We've got a deal from China which is 60 times worse than the one that Indonesia got, right? We've got the NHS, people sitting on trolleys for 24 hours, sometimes 48 hours. You know, the whole business, the grooming gangs, there's so much going on. He decides to talk about AI, but here he is when he's asked about Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor.
Rachel Reeves is doing a fantastic job. She has my full confidence. She has the full confidence of the entire party.
So what does that mean? She has the full confidence of the entire party?
It's waffle.
Really?
Whenever he goes off script, he just stumbles, falls, trips up, cannot speak.
No.
Because he does not have...
How can he be this bad at public speaking?
He doesn't have the intellectual dexterity to be able to go off script.
Yeah.
He's so robotic in all that he does and says that if he's dragged away from that auto cue that's in front of him, then he's lost.
Yeah. But I find that astonishing. You know, this is a bloke who spent his entire life as a so-called barrister, right? I never had the good fortune to see him in court, but I hope he was better in court than he is, you know, standing behind a microphone. He was always bad at public speaking when he was on PMQs because he couldn't ever really pivot to something. I remember I can't remember which one it was, but it was sometime early in his career as the leader of the opposition, and a news story broke at about 10 minutes to midday. And he didn't bring it up. And it was a really damaging story for the Tories. But he didn't bring it up at Prime Minister's questions because he couldn't arrange himself to be up to date enough 10 minutes later to ask the question.
His mind is not sharp enough.
It's really not.
To go from subject to subject.
If you thought that was waffle, have a look at this.
I've seen this for myself as a leader of a public service. And this is entirely human. But new technology can provoke a reaction, a sort of fear, an inhibition, a caution, if you like. And because of the fears of a small risk, too often you miss the massive opportunity. So we've got to challenge that mindset. Because actually, the far bigger risk is that if we don't go for it, we're left behind by those who do.
What on earth is he talking about?
Does he believe what he says?
I've no idea. I don't know what he said.
He must talk himself into actually believing what he says, which is almost...
caution, if you like.
Yeah.
No, I don't like, actually. Shut up.
But, of course, what you need to remember is the emphasis on every fifth or maybe seventh.
Do you think he's been overtrained?
Without a shadow of a doubt. Any kind of...
Make sure you punch every fifth word. Punch it.
I mean, he's really, truly not natural. He doesn't speak or act walk or talk like a human being.
Like a human being, no. We're fixing the foundations. There is a caution, if you like.
And, of course, we all know the reason why, and I've told you this many times, Mike. It's down to the fact that when he was side by side with Corbyn those years ago in the shadow cabinet, when he was asleep in a hotel one night, surrounded by all the lunatic lefties, Russia or China crept in and implanted a chip into his head, and they now control him.
Was it alternatively, when he went to sleep one night, there was a big pod in the garden, and it's like the invasion of the body snatchers, you know, and as you sleep, you kind of get taken over by the pod, and the creature from the pod becomes you, and instead of Donald Sutherland being a very nice, normal human being, he starts going like that, and that's how it all ends. That's the end of the film.
I think it's a chip. I think the chip was secretly implanted into him, and now he is being operated, managed and run from a land far, far away.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, he's not being managed from America, because Pat has pointed out, and we should have mentioned this earlier, morning Mike and Mr Blexley, my best news is that Donald Trump hasn't invited Starmer and Peter Mandelson to his inauguration yet, but he's invited Nigel Farage. You have to love it. Yeah, so he's invited 16 heads of state, Donald Trump, and our friend Sir Keir Starlin isn't one of them. He's not going, and neither is Mandelson.
I need to correct you. It's Sir Keir Stasi.
Sorry.
Okay,
sorry. It's an easy mistake to make.
It is.
How about this from Mark in Selby? Mike, the mobile piece price should go to Nokia, a.k.a. Nokia. I would vote for that. How can he say we've got to have it again? Let's have Starmer and the Mobile Peace Prize.
And as well as Matt, I'm delighted that the inspiring Nobel Peace Nobel Prize winner said,
"What is wrong with him?
Free the sausages."
I'm sorry. Free the sausages. There's a deal going, actually, to free the sausages. Apparently Biden's hoping before he leaves, which is about a week left, they're going to do a deal with Hamas. Well, sausages are all going to get out.
Yeah, well, but there's one word there.
Yeah.
Trump.
Yes.
That is the Trump
Because he
factor.
said, did he? He said, if you haven't released the hostages by the time I get in, there's going to be all hell is going to be let loose on you.
Correct.
You know,
yeah.
You pieces of scum.
Biden will claim it.
Yeah.
Biden will claim it as some kind of victory of diplomatic skill and expertise. No, one word, Trump.
Yes.
It's him who's all over that.
Now, you might remember that I have spent many a year in the old Fleet Street press world, and there is no better way to contrast two different versions of the same story than to contrast the Daily Telegraph and the Guardian this morning, right? The Guardian's headline says, Starmer backs Reeves and warns of ruthless public spending cuts. The Telegraph's version of that story is Prime Minister throws Reeves' future into doubt.
Yes. There you go.
I know which one I believe.
Pick your side, ladies and gentlemen.
It's definitely not the Guardian. They got nothing right yesterday. They were the ones yesterday that were claiming that the new AI revolution was going to cost, not going to cost us, was going to earn us £450 billion in revenues, but they couldn't explain exactly why. But their headline says, the first sign of their story is, the first paragraph, Rachel Reeves will remain Chancellor until the next general election, Keir Starmer has insisted, as he warned the Treasury would be ruthless over public spending cuts to help meet the government's fiscal rules. Well, apparently she's already broken the government's fiscal rules, and the Treasury are not very happy about it.
I'm not a gambling man, but I would wager, if I did, that she will not be in post at the next general election, unless that general election is called tomorrow.
Exactly. I think she's going to be out of a job by June at the latest, possibly March at the earliest.
Yeah, and of course it's just blatant untruth, isn't it? There's no way she'll be Chancellor for another 4.5 years, and in fact it's highly unlikely, I think, that this government will survive for another 4.5 years.
Exactly.
But we shall have to wait and see. But talking of this AI revolution, which of course was the centre point of Starmer's speech yesterday, what so many experts are saying in the papers today is that AI requires a huge amount of power.
Of electricity, yes. Ross Clark has written about it in The Sun. We're going to talk to him later.
Yeah, because for these calculations to be done by these computers, which are vast apparently, in such a short amount of time, requires huge volumes of electricity. And of course, many people are saying now, with Miliband's lunatic pledged to kind of depend entirely on wind and solar, which, of course, is going to leave us way, way short of what we need. That basically the infrastructure in the country is not set up for it yet.
No, absolutely not. And here's what they're saying in the Telegraph. There is speculation that Ms Rachel Reeves could be replaced by Pat McFadden, the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, who is often described as the de facto Deputy Prime Minister. It has also emerged yesterday that Sir Keir has appointed Olaf Henriksen Bell, the former Treasury official, as his Director of Policy, in what will be seen by some as a blow to the Chancellor's authority. It's a good name, that, isn't it? Olaf Henriksen Bell.
Yeah, indeed.
Sounds like something you ring when you're in trouble.
No.
Ring the Olaf Henriksen bell.
I'm sorry, Mike, to keep correcting you, but, you know, when you're going to ring someone, you get your Nobel out, don't you?
You do get your Nobel out. Just get a quick call on the old Nobel. Yeah, hello? Sorry, Keir. No, I'm busy. I'm doing a show. Get off. It's 18 minutes past 6. I don't know where it's gone wrong this morning, but it's going all right, I think. Coming up, we're going to tell you why you won't be able to say... I met a woman on the way to the pub tonight, when you're in the pub tonight. This is Talk.
Things are going on, we know it, we're not allowed to talk about it, the authorities won't let you. That is what is so corrosive to the kind of social capital that generates this stuff in the first place. We have to be honest. Of course, you know, we shouldn't engage in kind of, you know, sort of aggressive language against minority communities here. Yeah. Most people in the Pakistani community are not abusing their children, and we shouldn't drift into that. At the same time, there is an issue.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
22 minutes past 6, I'm Mike Graham. This, of course, is Morning Glory, here with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. We've got 4 glorious hours of Morning Glory because it is the only place to be. It's the home of common sense. It is the year of common sense. Lots of things are happening on a daily basis, which convince me that we are actually going to sort of reset the balance of common sense. It's going to come back. Got this from Andy in Southsea. Good morning, gentlemen. Good God. Metal Mickey Starmer is the gift that keeps on giving. Free the sausages, smash the smaggling guns, mobile peace prizes. How can anyone take this guy seriously? I mean, it is a real issue, isn't it? If you're a world leader, as he seems to think he is, refers to himself there as a leader, surely you've got to get better at it.
The gaff-prone Prime Minister.
Yes.
And this is what he's increasingly being known as.
Yeah.
Because it is gaff after gaff after gaff. And I think what it fundamentally shows is that he's a manufactured politician. When he set out at the start of his working life, clearly he wanted to be a lawyer and was successful at that.
Was he?
And well, he rose to be the Director of Public Prosecutions.
Yeah. But that's like a public sector job, though, isn't it?
It is.
I call a successful lawyer somebody who drives around in an Aston Martin, sits around the High Court and gets called out once in a while to get about £7,000 an hour to represent the highest paid celebrities in Britain.
Yeah,
that's what I call a successful lawyer.
Yep. But he got to lead a public department. And you can't do that if you're entirely stupid. But...
Well, you say that.
Well, yes, thank you. He might be in the process of proving me entirely wrong.
Have you seen who they put in charge of the Bar Association? But that's another story. No. Don't ask me. So we'll get to that.
But he's kind of so stilted and so unnatural in his speaking that I think it probably stems from just an entire background of being a manufactured politician, being very kind of public servicey in his working life, towing the line, speaking the speak, walking the walk of that department.
He keeps talking about public service like he's Meghan Markle, you know, and he keeps talking about how he's a government of service, and you know he knows when he headed the department that he headed at the CPS that he was all about service. It's not a real. He's never had a real job.
No, he's never been in a...
Where people make fun of each other, where they have a little bit of a laugh and a shout around the coffee machine, where they might go out of a night and have a bit of a works night out. People might get a bit, tiddly, do the wrong thing. All of that. I don't think he's done any of that, has he?
And they might say, put your Nobel away, we're going for a drink.
Yeah, I'll just catch somebody on the mobile and we'll see how we go. Talking about pubs, right? This is on the front page of the Times. Labour law threatens customers' free speech. Unbelievably, pubs could ban customers from speaking about contentious matters such as religious beliefs or transgender rights over fears of falling foul of Labour's workers' rights reforms. This is in case the bartender or a waitress or somebody overhears something that you've said which upsets them.
There is no time to be frivolous over this story.
No.
OK?
Right.
This is
very,
very
proper scary.
Serious.
Yeah.
For me, the most pernicious part of this government is that the messaging, everything they've said, has been very deliberate in regards to, without bringing in the legislation, shutting down opposition speech.
Yes.
Free speech. We've heard it all.
Right.
If you express a view that is not towing the Labour left party line, then you are immediately branded as being far right.
Right.
No matter what it is you say. Yeah. And so many millions of people who are fundamentally not of the far right, whose politics may be right of centre, who may like free speech, common sense and the such like, are suddenly branded by this pernicious government and its appalling Prime Minister as being far right.
Yeah.
And they've convinced people, this government have convinced people, in fact, they've frightened people into thinking that free speech is long gone.
Well, people are frightened because I already see people's reaction on social media, and we had a bunch of calls yesterday from people who have had visits from His Majesty's Constabulary, shall we say, because of words that they've written either on social media or letters or emails that they've written to MPs, and suddenly they've had plod round to say, excuse me, what did you mean by this?
Yeah, well, what many people that I've spoken to think is that kind of new laws have been brought in about free speech from this government, and as yet they have not.
Right.
But the messaging from this government is terrifying people into thinking that free speech is becoming a thing of yesteryear.
Yes.
Now, talking of legislation, this is where it gets potentially scary.
Yes.
Because Labour's workers' rights reforms, which they're looking to bring in through new legislation, is going to be very protective of workers' rights in regards to basically being offended.
Yes.
So, what the concerns are of this law, and the example used here is, say, for example, somebody is a bartender or a waiter in a restaurant, and so they serve people at tables, or they serve people that would be gathered around at a bar having a chat.
Yes.
This law is going to say that these workers need to be protected from hearing something that they might not like.
Which was not intended for them to hear.
Yes.
Because it's a conversation being had by people who happen to be in a place of hospitality, shall we say, and the person working there is going to be overhearing what they're saying.
Correct.
It's not going to be aimed at them, but yet they could be upset by it, and if they're not protected from that, that they could then sue the owner of the premises.
Yes, for not protecting them. So, for example, you and me going for a bit of lunch.
Right.
Yeah, and we're sitting down, and we're right in the wrongs of the world.
Yeah.
As we see it.
As we see it.
And a waiter overhears us, gets deeply offended by what they hear us saying, and then their employer could be in the shtuck.
Yeah, absolutely right.
It's
Funnily enough,
so
this happened to
Orwellian.
me a couple of years ago. I was in a bar around here somewhere, and nothing particularly, sensational was going on. And I was having a conversation with a couple of mates who were there. We were talking business, we were talking this, that, and the other. And I can't even remember what was said, but somebody said something which was vaguely amusing. And this guy who was going around collecting glasses said something like, "I wouldn't say that if I were you." To which I told him to F off. I was like, "It's got nothing to do with you. It's none of your business. Get lost. Get back behind the bar." And that was the end of that. But under this new scenario, presumably I'd be dragged out in handcuffs.
Well,
For not protecting him from hearing it.
They haven't brought these laws in yet, but these are what are under consideration.
Incredible. The only good part of this story is that the Equality and Human Rights Commission, apparently, which is the EHRC, not to be confused with the ECHR, hard to get those two confused, basically saying that this will be particularly challenging because in a philosophical beliefs such as people's views on religion or women's rights are complicated, and they also need to be protected. So my rights for freedom of speech need to be protected at the same time as their rights not to be offended.
That is the key expression, a philosophical belief.
Yeah.
So if we are having that lunch, sitting down there and righting the wrongs of the world, in regards to whatever it may be that we're discussing, faith, for example, migration, anything that we choose to discuss.
Football.
Yeah. If it is a philosophical belief that we hold, and this will apply to sex, gender, all that kind of stuff. So we've got to keep a very, very close eye on what this government tries to do with this legislation.
It's hard to believe that people actually willingly elected this crowd of absolute clowns, right? Because not only are they clowns, but they want to try and control every aspect of your life. They want to tell you what you can throw away, which bin you have to put things in that you want to throw away, how far you can walk, how far you can drive, how far you can cycle, where you can cycle, what you can say when you're down the pub, what you can say when you're in the office, what you can say on social media. I mean, is there anything they don't want to control?
I actually have a degree of sympathy for some people who I think may be in part responsible for your growing audience figures.
Yes.
Because they may, last summer, have misguidedly, in their desperation to get rid of a massively failing Tory government, have voted Labour.
Yes.
They might not have thought it through very well. They might not have been aware exactly what a Labour government would look like, sound like, and what it would try to do. And I think it is now, and only now, that we are seeing, with the tumbling Labour figures in the polls, right? Their ratings are tumbling.
Yeah.
That those people, I think, who voted for them last summer are now beginning to regret that and thinking about, well, what am I going to do next time? Who shall I vote for to get them out? And if those people are coming over to this station, for example, and listening and learning from their mistakes, then I think they need to be welcomed and they need to be understood, and we need to think, OK, they're reassessing the situation.
They are, absolutely. Everybody's welcome to listen to this, even if you don't like it. I mean, I'm very happy for people to listen to it and not like it and call me all sorts of names under the sun. I'm not going to report them to anyone. Speaking of polls, by the way, the Reform Party, who had another boost, they're now in second place to Labour. The Tories have been pushed into third place, by the way. But Labour, as you say, have tumbled from an incredibly high sort of lead of about 20-odd% over Reform. Their lead is now about 1 or 2%.
And I saw a poll yesterday that had Labour and Reform neck and neck.
Pretty much.
So there you go with the Tories in third.
Absolutely.
So
right.
these polls are telling a story. I think that so many people who may have voted for Labour are now entirely disenchanted and looking elsewhere to place their vote next time.
I think they are. We're going to talk about Starmer raving on about Brexit and how good that was coming up. We're going to talk about Elon Musk as well. Sean says, morning, Mike. Comparing Keith Starling to a robot is a massive insult to robots. And Paul says, sterling closed at $1.22 last night. It's being hit at the moment, not just because of Starmer and Reeves, but because the dollar is strong against everything and the expectation of Trump coming into office. The curious thing is that oil price is rising, even with a strong dollar, which means petrol prices will rise in Britain and push up inflation. Well, everybody knows that. I mean, the one thing that they've also done, this idiotic government, is give a load of pay rises to people in the public sector, which, of course, has had the added pressure on inflation, because when you give people a pay rise, that tends to mean that inflation goes up. How do they not know this?
No, Mike. Honestly, I'm spending all of this hour correcting you.
Yes.
OK, because those inflation-busting pay rises that have been given to those heavily unionised sectors, they're spending all that money and creating huge growth in the economy, aren't they?
Of course they are, yeah.
Or
we just haven't seen it yet. No, we just haven't
seen
seen it yet.
It's
a delayed reaction.
Coming down the line.
It's coming down the line. It's 6:33. Coming up, we'll hear from Joe Biden as well. Also, we'll see from what Donald Trump is doing. He's less than a week away from being the new president of the United States of America. I can't wait, personally. It's going to be fascinating. And the inauguration will be all over it here at Talk, of course. We'll bring you all of that and much more coming next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 6:36. I'm Mike Graham, with you, of course, all the way through until 10 o'clock. Stuart says, morning, Mike. Stuart from Bradford on this free speech. I say what I want, where I want. If people are offended, that's not my problem. It won't hurt anyone to be offended. Great show. I think so. And Paul in Bournemouth says, if Starmer thinks Reeves is doing a fantastic job, I hate to see her doing a lousy job. Well, absolutely right. Let's get a voice note from Simon.
Morning, Mike. Simon in Spain here. I think Keir Starmer has been learning from the school of public speaking from Joe Biden. He's just got a new mobile number. Joe, can you give out a number for me? Yeah, 61... No, hang on a minute. 63... Sorry, beg your pardon. 62... I've got it now. 621-887.
Yes. Who can forget that? It was a great clip last week. We actually managed to put it on Plague of the Week as well. Thank you very much indeed. We're going to talk about Joe Biden as well, because Elon Levy is here, former Israeli government spokesman, on the news basically from President Biden that there is a Gaza ceasefire deal on the cards and maybe even on the brink. Let's have a look at what President Biden had to say.
On the war between Israel and Hamas, we're on the brink of a proposal that I laid out in detail months ago, finally coming to fruition. I have learned in many years of public service to never, 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 ever give up.
He's giving up in about 4 days. But that's another story. And let's talk to Elon Levy, who is, of course, former Israeli government spokesman. Elon, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
Good to talk to you. If this is true, obviously, and the hostages get released, it's a great story. It's a great news story. Everyone will be very happy about it. All right-thinking people around the world will be rejoicing. And if it does happen, it will be no thanks to Joe Biden, frankly. It will be thanks to Israel and its very, very robust defence of its own nation and its very robust taking apart of Hamas.
Sure. Mike, look, first of all, let me bring you an update from Israel overnight. Everyone is waking up a little bit more sleep-deprived today because we had another Iranian ballistic missile attack from Yemen overnight. At 3 o'clock in the morning, half of the country jumped out of bed and ran for shelter because the Houthi pirates, the same ones who've been attacking British ships in the Red Sea, fired a ballistic missile at Israel. Everyone had to run for shelter, and one of the pieces of shrapnel hit a house near Jerusalem. You're right, we're waking up today to news that a ceasefire deal could be close, and there are mixed feelings in Israel today. On the one hand, everyone wants to get those hostages out. We know they're being starved and tortured and raped and executed, and their agony has been going on for too long. We want to get them home. But on the other hand, there is fear about a deal that would end up leaving Hamas in power. We want to get the hostages out, but we don't want to leave their kidnappers in power in Gaza. And there is concern among the hostages' families as well that we're talking about a three-part deal that wouldn't get all the hostages out in one go. And they're worried that if you don't get all the hostages out in one go, some of them are going to be stuck there forever. But they're pinning their hopes on President Trump. They're looking at President Trump, who is promising there will be all hell to pay. All hell will break loose if the hostages aren't released. And they say that's the way that you deal with a psychopathic jihadi terrorist group that is still holding hostages, including children. Yeah. You threaten them. You don't ask them nicely. You thump on the table.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I mean, you won't at all be surprised, I dare say, to see that David Lammy, while he was on sort of a patrol yesterday in the Middle East, went to see Mohammed Abbas in Palestine, the Palestinian Authority, still seems to think that UNRWA is the answer to everybody's ills. I mean, it's so disappointing, really, for me, personally, as a British citizen, to see our Foreign Secretary mixing with these people.
Yeah, deeply disappointing to see David Lammy's visit to Israel, where he essentially committed more UK terror financing to UNRWA. I mean, there's no other way to put it. UNRWA is a Hamas front. It's a UN agency that employs Hamas terrorists on a massive scale, and he's pledging more UK taxpayer funding to the same school system that produced the October 7th monsters. Israel has been warning that it is infested with terrorism, and the UK is ignoring Israel's warnings. It's ignoring the hostages' families too. Mandy Damari is the mother of the only remaining British hostage, Emily. She's still trapped in Gaza. She was in Britain a few weeks ago. She begged the British government, please lead an international initiative to get humanitarian aid to the hostages. Keep them alive till we can get them out. And stop voting at the United Nations for an unconditional ceasefire that means not conditional on the release of Emily and the other hostages. Yeah. And the UK just ignored her. It hasn't put any pressure to get humanitarian aid to the hostages. It went back to the General Assembly and voted for an unconditional ceasefire that would abandon the hostages. And the families are expecting the UK to use its leverage and its pressure as an ally on Hamas's patrons: Qatar, Turkey, Iran. Stop playing nice. These are countries that are backing a terrorist group that is holding a British hostage, and we need British power brought to bear against these countries to force Hamas to let them go now.
It's absolutely shocking. Elon, thank you very much indeed. Elon Levy there with some pretty harsh words for David Lammy, who's been out in the Middle East over the last couple of days. Still, as you heard there, Peter, not convinced that UNRWA is a terrorist front, not convinced that UNRWA is in fact part of the problem in the Middle East as opposed to part of the solution. A meeting with Mohammed Abbas, who's from the Palestinian Authority, who is meant to be the sort of moderate voice of Palestine, but has yet to condemn what Hamas is doing.
I don't know how much clearer the evidence of UNRWA's highly suspicious, I'm being polite, highly suspicious behaviour around all of this needs to be before the British government go, are we actually going to question this now?
Right.
Are we going to hold them to account?
Well,
are we going to ask very difficult questions?
Right. Well, this is the government that released money to UNRWA after it was stopped by Rishi Sunak's government, because Rishi Sunak's government understood that UNRWA had not only helped to create what happened on October the 7th of 2023, but they actually had active members of UNRWA taking part in the massacre. I mean, what more information do you need than that?
Yeah, exactly. And it's really, frankly, quite appalling. Of course, this time next week, as we mentioned earlier, Donald Trump will be the President of the United States of America.
Yes.
And Hamas, you better pay attention to that, because I'm sure that one of the first things Donald Trump is going to want to do is improve the situation in the Middle East for the majority of people. When I say that, majority of Israelis, most definitely. I'm sure he's going to be a staunch ally of that nation, which certain people want to wipe off the face of the earth. And I'm sure he's going to be an enemy of terrorists. So they better watch out.
Well, I mean, as we just heard from Elon Levy there, you know, overnight, which David Lammy doesn't seem to have commented on, they've been under attack again from some Iranian-backed Houthis in Yemen, firing missiles into Israel.
A ballistic missile.
That's the nightly and daily fight that they've got on their hands.
The reality that Israelis living in Israel have to face every day.
Every day.
And let's remember, Israel is a secular society as well. There are many people of other faiths that live happily in that country, side by side with Jews, with the Israelis, making a living, contributing to that nation. So it's not exclusively a nation occupied merely by Jewish people.
No.
And yet their uncomfortable reality is being bombed and facing hostility from terrorist organisations who simply want to wipe them from the face of the earth because of the faith they follow.
I know. Shocking, isn't it? Let's get a voice note on this from Anna.
Morning, Mike. Hannah. Sorry. With all due respect, the only reason that Hamas and, well, let's call it Iran, have decided to toe the line is because there's the dark, scary shadow of Mr. Trump in the distance, and he has told them if it's not resolved by the time he gets in, there's nowhere for them to hide.
Yeah, and I think he means it as well. Let's hope that that means that the hostages will be released. But as Elon said, it can't be unconditional. There needs to be conditions put on it. How about this from Lisa in Hartford, who says, Mike, could you please play the clip from Starmer's speech yesterday when he muddled up Nobel Peace Prize and said Mobile Peace Prize? Oh, go on then.
And as well as Matt, I'm delighted that the inspiring Nobel Peace Nobel Prize winner said.
What a plague. Coming up, we're going to find out why prisons have been overtaken by drones, and basically prison officers are powerless apparently to stop drugs being basically delivered and all sorts of other things being delivered into prisons by drones flying all over the place. Absolutely extraordinary story. Peter Blexley and I back after this.
budget didn't help business confidence, and business confidence is crucial, and we need business investment. So but the origins of that problem were before the last general election, where the Labour Party promised not to raise basic taxes on income, value-added tax. So they could have gone to the country and said, we've got a fiscal problem, everybody's going to have to contribute, but they didn't. They tied their own hands, and we were left with these rather damaging, business-unfriendly taxes.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 6:50, 10 minutes to 7. Peter Blexley's here with me. We're looking through all the stories in the papers. We're going to move off politics for a moment and do a few other bits and pieces as well. Morning, Mike, says Malcolm in Barnet. If I'm in a pub and I say the gooners are rubbish and the server supports them, will I be reported? Well, it's a very good question. I don't know. David says, morning, Mike, will this law also apply to Starmer's speeches? Because I find them and him highly offensive. Well, yeah, maybe you can report him. Maybe that's what we can do if they bring in this law. And just start reporting loads of MPs and saying that, you know, you need the police round because you've been offended by something that they've said. A couple of stories to talk about, including, I thought we should start with this one. Prisons are now overrun by drones, apparently.
So as if we haven't got enough problems with our prisons in this country. Like, for example, they're overcrowded.
Right.
They're full. We're having to let lags out early.
Yes.
Even earlier than they normally would be.
Right.
Because there's no spaces in prison.
Right.
So that the courts can actually send some people to jail.
Yeah.
I mean, it's in a dreadful, appalling state. The prison estate really is. So now, the Chief Inspector of Prisons, a man who goes by the name of Charlie Taylor, has done an inspection of certain jails, and guess what? At HMP Manchester and Long Lartin in Worcestershire.
Yeah.
Now, Long Lartin has housed a lot of
housed a lot of IRA terrorists, I seem to remember.
Indeed. Do you remember the helicopter escape from there many, many years ago?
I do.
Because it was full of cat A's. Anyway, those two prisons, they have admitted that they have, and I'll use the quote, ceded the airspace to drones.
Incredible.
Because what is happening, and there was over 220 examples of this in a year, of drones dropping contraband for the prisoners.
And amazingly, it varies from illegal drugs and weapons to mobile phones, one for Keir Starmer, and even takeaway meals. So they're effectively getting old Uber Eats and Just Eat to deliver stuff on a drone to them.
And,
how does that work?
And because they've let the netting fall into disrepair and other kind of methods that are there to counter these drones, they are acting with impunity, these villains. And what they're doing, because they're always inventive, they're always thinking of new ways to do it, they're dropping parcels of drugs. Now, I'm sure many people will appreciate that a small parcel of drugs can be very valuable, especially in prison, where it goes for a higher price than it does do out on the streets, for obvious reasons.
Yes.
So a little bag of powder, for example, that might weigh an ounce, is incredibly valuable in jail.
Right.
And it's a small little bag.
Right.
And these bags are being dropped, for example, in areas of the prison grounds where the lawn's been cut, but the grass cuttings have not been raked up.
Right.
So they drop it, it falls into the grass cuttings.
Oh, right, and then they rake the grass.
So it can't be seen.
Right.
And then the lads, when they go out there, know exactly where to find it. Likewise, when rubbish is not being cleared away, they package the drugs up in a bin liner and drop it into the rubbish area. And the lads know exactly where to go to retrieve these drugs. And so it goes on.
Well, seemingly you know all about this, Peter, so why doesn't the prison authority know about it?
Utter lawlessness is being allowed in our jails. So consequently, people are not being rehabilitated, and they're coming out to, guess what? a life of crime all over again.
Exactly. And funnily enough, we saw a story, I think it was at the back end of last year, that more and more criminals are actually applying for jobs as prison guards so that they can aid and abet this kind of, lawlessness which is going on.
Yeah.
I'll tell you two people who should be in jail. There's a picture of the two of them, and they look exactly like you would think they would look. Two Just Stop Oil protesters, Di Bly, great name, 77, and her accomplice Alison Lee, 66, two women who should know better, quite frankly. They shouted Darwin would be turning in his grave yesterday. We're at Westminster Abbey, desecrating Darwin's grave. Now, I don't know about you, but this is, for me, one of the worst things that any protester can do. You know, you can throw paint over a painting, which is pretty hideous. You can throw paint over a building. But to desecrate the grave of Charles Darwin in Westminster Abbey, I think is the lowest of the low.
Westminster Abbey.
Yeah.
Famed
consecrated
throughout the world,
ground.
One of the greatest buildings where people go to worship, practice their faith, that has ever been made anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
And Charles Darwin, a man whose brilliance so many years ago kind of set the science timetable out for generations to come thereafter.
Yeah.
And these two women, who should know better.
They should.
They are not children.
No.
66 and 77, possibly grandparents, who clearly have nothing better to do in their lives than to go and commit criminal damage on Charles Darwin's grave.
And all because they think the Earth is getting too warm. Ms Bly, it may not surprise you to know, who is a mother of four from Road in Somerset, led Reading Council from 1992 to 1997. And Ms Lee, who's from Derby, is a retired teaching assistant. Doesn't that tell you all you need to know?
It certainly does.
Lots of planks.
Well, I would strongly expect that in future weeks and months they will both be going to jail.
Let's hope so.
Because prison sentences have been pretty stern for people committing such acts in recent times, and rightly so. And whilst they get imprisoned, which I sincerely hope they both do, they may have time to reflect upon their actions. At the ages of 77 and 66, call me what you will, but maybe they could better spend their time with grandchildren, if they have any, maybe getting their steps in to keep themselves mobile and fit and healthy, maybe doing a bit Pilates, and who knows what else.
Why not, indeed?
Rather than desecrating
it's absolutely
Darwin's
shocking,
grave.
really shocking. Good story in The Sun on page 23, a £100,000 mistake. You know, we've all made mistakes at work. This one, I think, takes the biscuit, though. This is a bungling crew member of a British Airways flight accidentally activated the emergency slide. Now, I've been fortunate enough to have flown in many different places in the world, many different planes. I've never actually had to get off a plane on an emergency slide. I don't know whether you have. But apparently the gaff at the BA flight would have cost the airline something like £100,000. The Airbus A321 was grounded and the flight from London Heathrow to Brussels was cancelled following the blunder on Monday morning.
Because it put the plane out of action.
Yeah.
So they had to get another jet to fly the passengers to Brussels.
How do you, I mean, call me old-fashioned, but how do you accidentally activate the emergency slide? Presumably there's a great big, you know, sort of lever that you have to pull, because you have to do that to open the door to begin with. In order to activate the emergency slide, you must have to do something quite deliberate.
You would imagine there would be checks and balances
in
place to ensure that you didn't do it when it shouldn't be done.
Right.
But it's not the first time. BA have had 3 such instances in recent months, by all accounts.
Yeah.
So clearly there needs to be some better training, perhaps, or a review of their systems, because it costs them a lot of money and inconvenienced many, many passengers.
Exactly right. I see from, as you say, from previous events, The Sun has also told a story of how a bungling steward had a first day to forget when he activated the emergency slide as the plane was taxiing to the runway. I mean, that is not what you want on your first day, do you? You know, what's your job? Oh, yeah, I'm a flight attendant. I've got my first job as a cabin crew on British Airways. Really excited. It's going to be great. And just as you're taxiing out, you flick a switch and all the slides come out.
Yeah, exactly. Oops.
I mean, blimey. I mean, we had some fun yesterday with the washing machine story. Maybe this is today's washing machine story. Things that you've done at work, which you probably shouldn't have done. Blunders. Things that have cost the company loads and loads of money. Let's get a voice note from Dave.
Hello, Mike, Peter. Great show. I don't understand what's the issue about drones or mobile phones in prison. You could easily jam the signals. Christ, I used to have a mobile phone jammer when I used to go into London on the train at Greater Anglia. I used to turn it on and people couldn't use their phone in the carriage. It ain't hard, it's not rocket science. Anyway, great show, Dave from Southend. Cheers.
Dave from Southend. I'm pretty sure, well, Peter will back me up on this, I'm pretty sure it's illegal to block people's phone signal, isn't it?
Oh, there are jammers out there.
Yeah.
And,
well, I remember in the old days...
illegal and some which very much
in the old
not.
days, when mobile phones first came into a sort of use, you would go into... If you were staying in a hotel, you couldn't use it in the hotel because they wanted you to use the hotel phone.
Yeah.
So they could charge you ludicrous amounts of money, you know, like £10 an hour or something. But you couldn't use your remote, so they were obviously jamming it. We'll come around to a couple of other stories later on, but unbelievably, we're out of time. The one I wanted to do that we didn't do is Netflix overtakes BBC One for the first time. More viewers than the BBC in the last 3 months.
Could I just point out quickly that that BA story was on page 23 of The Sun today.
Yeah.
On page 26 and 27 of The Sun today, there's an article by a woman who claims that she's never had an orgasm with her husband, despite being married for many years.
Your wife,
I'd like to point out.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 2 minutes past 7. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course. 4 glorious hours of Morning Glory this morning, as indeed it is every single weekday morning from Monday to Friday, 6 till 10. Julia Hartley-Brewer will be along at 10 o'clock. We've got much to discuss this morning. Rachel Reeves front and centre of many of the papers as well. We've got PM throws Reeves' future into doubt on the front of the Telegraph. The Guardian has gone slightly another way. They've gone Starmer backs Reeves and warns of ruthless public spending cuts. This all stems from yesterday's AI unveiling, where Keir Starmer decided to tell everybody that AI is the future, but he couldn't really quite explain why. And nobody really was any the wiser after listening to him for so long, because at the end of the day, Keir Starmer is incapable of selling anything. I mean, listen to this, and this is him trying to tell you how great it's going to be.
And as well as Matt, I'm delighted that the inspiring Nobel Nobel Prize winner.
You can't even say Nobel Prize winner. Mobile, me, I mean, it's just ridiculous, isn't it? The truth of the matter is, though, that we've got Rachel Reeves back in London today, back from China, with a deal for £600 million worth of investment, which is approximately 60 times less investment than China gave to Indonesia, 30 times less than they gave to Peru. You know, it's not exactly anything to write home about, but she's coming back like the beleaguered football manager who's about to be fired from their job, having been given an award by the management, by the directors rather, and the owner of the football club to say, oh yeah, she's doing absolutely fine. We're really, really, really in support of what she's doing. Basically, she's a lame duck, as it says on the front page of the Daily Mail this morning, as indeed is Tulip Sadiq, who appears to be also on the brink of being kicked out of office. She's the anti-corruption minister, rather laughably called, because she's been involved in what can only be described as a bit of corruption, it would seem, in Bangladesh. And the Bangladeshi authorities would like to talk to her about the matters arising from that. We'll also be talking this morning to Tobias Elwood, because apparently the government wants to impose a free speech ban in pubs. If you go into a pub, you might be told you can't talk about religion. You might be told that you can't talk about the Labour Party. You might be told that you can't talk about politics. You might be told you can't talk about football, because it might offend the people who are serving you. Because if they overhear something they don't like, it will be all hell to pay. Absolutely ridiculous. Also, breaking news overnight, Yemen has launched a massive missile attack on Tel Aviv in Israel. You heard it here as we were talking to a former Israeli government spokesman, because also, of course, Joe Biden is promising that there could be a peace deal literally just around the corner. 0344 499 1000 is the number. We'll be talking about a great many other things, of course, as well, including how it's possible that the prison estate in this country has got overrun by drones. Absolutely incredible stuff. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Stuart says this, Mike, I'm in a reception where they are playing BBC News. It's very offensive with a left-wing bias. Can I sue the employer? Very possibly so. Morning, Mike, says Nicholas in Yorkshire. Maybe the BA chap was trying to defrost the onboard fridge freezer. Interesting. And Dean says, Mike, can you shed any light on the rumours that 12 world leaders have been invited to President Trump's inauguration and Starmer isn't on the list, but Nigel Farage is? I do hope this is true. It is absolutely true, Dean, and it is pretty embarrassing for Britain to have the special relationship that we have, and everybody knows we have it with the United States of America, but Donald Trump has seen fit not to invite Sir Keir Starlin, no doubt because of his views on Donald Trump, no doubt because of David Lammy's sayings on Donald Trump, maybe indeed because of Sadiq Khan's protestations about what a horrible man Donald Trump is. You know, you can't mess around in politics and pretend that you're in a student union, because otherwise you end up being left on the outside of all of the good stuff that's going on. And next Monday, when Donald Trump is inaugurated as the 47th President of the United States of America, I consider it to be a massive stain on British history that our Prime Minister will not be there. Let's ask Tobias Elwood what he makes of it. Tobias, very good morning to you.
Good morning to you.
It's pretty awful, is it not, that, you know, here we are, supposedly the friend of the United States, the special relationship that exists between the two countries, the long history of support for one another in times of war and in times of peace, and we don't have a seat at the table.
Yes, I don't understand the details of this, so we'll wait for government perhaps to clarify. But you're absolutely right that the United States is our closest security ally. And as we've discussed on your programme many times, the world is getting far more dangerous, far more unstable, and we need to be close with America to deal with the challenges that are coming over the hill. I've just been commenting this week that 2025 will be the year of grey zone warfare. We're going to be attacked left, right and centre, and Western nations, particularly Britain and America, need to work together to unify and stand up to that threat. And what we're seeing in Ukraine, for example, is where Putin is surviving. He will continue to place a threat on the UK, the West, Europe, and indeed America as well. So it does seem a little bit confusing, puzzling as to why the Prime Minister, whatever you think of the Prime Minister, is not invited to be part of the inauguration process.
Yeah, quite. Yeah, but I mean, does it not also suggest that there's something that the Prime Minister might have done to mean that he would be excluded from it?
If there is anything that they've done, then that should be overlooked in some respect, because, as I say, to invite the leader, the closest security ally of America, which is the United Kingdom, they very much see us in that way. We offer a sense of purpose when it comes to global security. We help craft the international rules-based order as it sits today. So it would almost seem churlish if that's the case. There may be some detail that we're missing here, so I'm not sure we should jump to conclusions yet. It could be that a member of the royal family will be attending instead, which is actually the head of state, if you think about it. But it does seem odd. Certainly, I mean, I myself will be going to America for the inauguration period, not just to be witness the celebrations and the changeover, which will certainly be interesting, but also develop those strengths, to create those back channels, to have an understanding of where this Republican Party under Donald Trump, who, let's be honest, is far more controversial, will take America in a very, very different direction. But America has spoken. Donald Trump has been elected, and it's important that we work, as I stressed, with our closest security ally.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, it looks as though already the fact that Donald Trump is merely coming into office is having some effect on things going on in the Middle East. It looks very much as though there will be some kind of peace deal which will be possibly taking place over the course of the next few days. And we've just been speaking to Elon Levy from the Israeli side. He's a former government spokesman. He's saying we have to be a bit careful, but certainly Hamas are on the back foot. And Trump has warned, basically, if they have not been released, if the hostages have not been released by the time he gets into power, which is next Monday, there's going to be all sorts of hell to pay.
It could very well be that's the case. I don't know whether you recall, but when Jimmy Carter left office and Ronald Reagan came in, there were American hostages that the Iranians were keeping, and they were released only after Carter had departed. The talks that are taking place today, I'm pleased to learn that the Trump administration has representation there as well in Doha. So when we hear that the outgoing president suggests we're on the brink of a deal, that really is good news indeed. But we have been here before, remember, so close to securing an agreement, and then the talks then collapse. But perhaps it is this unpredictability of Trump, as you say, in saying they'll all hell will be paid unless something actually happens. That's focused the minds of Hamas. But you've just been reporting yourself that what the Houthis are doing in Yemen is trying to scupper the talks with fresh attacks that are taking place from Yemen. We will know in the next few hours where things stand.
Yeah, absolutely right. Let's talk about matters a bit closer to home. Keir Starmer's government goes from bad to worse every single day. We've got Rachel Reeves having come back from China with a very poor deal, it would seem. £600 million, 120 million a year over 5 years, 60 times less than they gave to Indonesia, 30 times less money than they gave to Peru. Also warnings yesterday that national security could be at risk if Britain invites China into the sort of energy market in Britain and helps them to set up, wind farms, helps them to set up solar panel farms, helps them to be part of our, if you like, our electricity grid. What do you make of the government's sort of cozying up to China?
Well, firstly, China isn't going away. This is going to be China's century. In our lifetimes, they will challenge the United States militarily, economically, and indeed technologically in dominance. And therefore, there needs to be some way of working with China. I think our trade with China is worth up to 10% of our GDP. That is huge. But you're right to point out the fact that China steals intellectual property. It coerces. It uses approaches which are not appropriate in the UK, or indeed, following international standards. Yeah. And especially when it comes to security matters. And given the fact that there is this geopolitical tensions growing between East and West, particularly between China and America, then we could easily find ourselves vulnerable in the very areas that you're talking about, critical national infrastructure, where they could so easily, through a backdoor electronic system, switch our processes off. I mean, our power wouldn't work if, for example, the wind farms were interfered with. So we're lacking a coherent strategy when it comes to China. How do we work with China in areas where it's safe to work with? And there are bigger issues such as climate change and so on that we need to work on. But at the moment, China is given a free rein. They are openly reinterpreting the international rules-based order, collecting countries through its One Belt, One Road programs to actually challenge the West in the way we do business, particularly at the United Nations and through the World Trade Organization. And I'm sorry that we didn't go there to China with a collective effort with our allies to try and challenge what China is doing. Instead, what's happening, and the United States is particularly, I'm afraid, at fault of this, is everybody's saying, we accept that China does this, we're just going to become more isolated, we're just going to look after ourselves. And that means globalization essentially is dead, and that'll affect all economies across the world.
But China doesn't care what anybody thinks. I mean, that's the bottom line, isn't it? I mean, we had to fight them off when Huawei were almost going to be given the kind of carte blanche to enter Britain as the official kind of government, you know, telephone business, which would have been a terribly bad idea. And it had to be the government of Britain, who, under the Tories at the time, said, no, thank you very much, we're not actually going to do it. But do you worry that this government that we currently have seems to be flailing around looking for investment and money from almost anywhere? It's almost like they don't care where it comes from.
Well, let me just answer that in two parts, because you mentioned Huawei, and I was one of the MPs. There are many others. This was Parliament, not government at the time, that actually raised our concerns to say we cannot have China embedded in our systems here. And they are not now, and that is actually good.
Yeah.
But across the world, there's over 100 countries, I think, that do have Huawei embedded into their systems. And those countries are now almost subservient, if you like, into following the path that China is leading. And over time, they will have to shift from using the dollar as their second currency to the RMB, and they will probably have to shift away from GPS in the longer term to use the Beidou system. So you can see how our world is splintering to two spheres of competing influence, and that's very, very dangerous indeed. It does mean it's more testing for our economy, and you always, when you hear this phrase, I have confidence in my minister, you normally know there's not long before the change is afoot. Right. But you know, we're seeing the pound at its lowest level, I think, for about a year or so. You've got a choice. You either raise taxes, or you cut spending, or you vastly improve growth, make the cake bigger, if you like, by improving business confidence. And we've not seen much of that. The AI is actually, for us, I think, very, very important. It was Jeremy Hunt that recognized this about a couple of years ago as Chancellor, to say, what is Britain good at? Look around us now. What are we now good at in today's day and age? Very, very competitive indeed. What we do well is creative industries, life sciences, fintech, financial services, pharmaceuticals. We are the third high-tech superpower in the world after America and China. That is what we need to excel at. That's what's going to allow our country to grow in this very, very competitive environment. And we need to stress that even further. But that requires all energies to then push this forward. Otherwise, you're going to end up in the situation now where we see our economy starting to actually stumble.
Yeah, indeed. Well, the pound at a 14-month low last night. We'll see how it opens this morning. Let's have a look at what Keir Starmer said yesterday about AI.
Look, I think it is important to recognise that we've got the freedom now in relation to regulation to do it in the way that we think is best for the UK, and that's what we intend to do. You're right to say there are different models around the world. There's a sort of EU approach or US approach, but we have the ability to choose the one that we think is in our best interest, and we intend to do so.
He doesn't quite say the B word, does he? But he wants to, or he maybe doesn't want to. But he's basically saying outside of the EU, we're in a better position.
Yeah, that's right. But then you prompt me to want to say the B word, because you might differ on this. I have always accepted the result of the referendum, but I've always felt, and I speak to defence businesses particularly, who are continue to be very angry, that the deal that we end up with is not the best Brexit deal that we could have. And not many people know this, but it was a contract. It was a 5-year deal that we had in 2020, and it comes up for renewal in the spring, in a few months' time. Do we go back to Brussels and sign again exactly the Brexit deal that we have today? I actually don't know anybody. Maybe you're going to be the first that will actually say, no, there's nothing to change here. We'll just sign on.
No, I don't think that. No, I agree. Actually, you might be surprised to know, Tobias. Actually, agree with you. No, I think the Brexit deal that we did was absolutely hopeless. You know, the fact that it took that long to organise it from 2019 to 2020, and it was it was half baked. It was half done. It wasn't finished. Northern Ireland was left hanging out outside the organisation altogether. No, I would much rather see a better deal done. No question at all.
Well, it's good to hear that, because I remember the votes themselves, and there were some individuals that knew exactly what was being debated on. I'm afraid many of my colleagues, sad though it is, weren't quite sure the difference between the customs union and the common market and so forth, of the differences, the impact and so forth on businesses. During the referendum itself, you know, you had people like Nigel Farage, you had people like David Frost actually saying, of course we're going to stay in the single market, because that would be dangerous to our economy. We've got our political distance, and that's what many people in Britain were concerned about. That's what I think you're concerned about, political distance from Brussels. Economically, though, you know, half of our trade is done with the continent, and therefore that's going to continue. And if we've got America putting up barriers as well, throwing tariffs and so forth, and we've got this deal coming up for renewal in this spring and summer, then we'd be daft economically not to say there is a better deal to have. So we don't have the regulations and all the challenges that British businesses have, particularly the international ones, defence especially, that bump into this every day, that makes doing business in Britain more costly than doing it on the continent.
Well, I think we'd probably differ on how the deal should be restructured, but we think there should be a new deal. So we'll have to talk about that another time. Good to talk to you, Tobias. Thank you very much indeed. Let's get a voice note from Karen on Israel.
Hi, Mike. Just listen to Elon Levy. Brilliant man. So eloquent, so intelligent. What Hamas did on October the 7th, what these horrible terrorists are capable of, they have no empathy whatsoever. That's how they're trained. They're trained to hate themselves. They're trained to hate the rest of the world. They are literally like robots. And that's another scary thing as well. I'm so angry as well about everything that Labour have done. I mean, beyond anger now, because they are appeasing a certain community as well, which will probably turn around and bite us because they're feeding that crocodile.
They are feeding that crocodile. You're absolutely right, Karen. And you're right to be angry. A lot of people are. I've never seen so many angry people at so many different things. So many reasons to be angry with this government because they're getting everything wrong. This from Sarah near Plymouth, who says, regarding Starmer getting his words mixed up, especially hostages and sausages, isn't it odd that he was never seen to do this when he was in opposition? I think he's finding his new role as Prime Minister too much to deal with. He has to go very soon. Absolutely. And Roy says, Peter Blexley for Home Secretary, immediately. Yeah, well, he would do a lot better job than Yvette Cooper, that's for sure. We've got loads more to do, including a look at the polls. Joe Twyman's coming up. Also, we're going to be talking about AI, because after yesterday's unveiling by the Prime Minister and the Mobile Peace Prize Brigade, I mean, I don't think anybody's any the wiser, are they? What does it all mean? What's he going to do? What is AI? And what's it good for? This is Talk.
of Los Angeles, Karen Bass, and Gavin Newsom share the lion's share of that blame because, as you mentioned, the water reservoirs were not filled. They have literally let billions of gallons of water, rainwater and snow runoff, flow into the Pacific Ocean rather than be retained to fill water reservoirs that could be used to fight fires. People ask me sometimes, Julia, what is the definition of liberalism? Well, the best definition we can see right now is that in Los Angeles, they had dozens of genders of firefighters.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:25. I'm Mike Graham, and of course, Michael says this: sticks and stones may break my bones, but words are now too hurty. Yeah, well, if you're in a pub, that may well be the case in future. Let's get a voice note from Laura.
Morning, Mike. Laura in Wiltshire. Just to say, one of my greatest friends works at a prison that I won't name in Wales, and they know exactly who's dealing drugs, taking drugs, bringing them in, and the governor says drugs and dealing with them are not a priority for the prison. So what the hell are they supposed to do? And all the archers that are meant to check the people who work there when they come in are not manned during the main hours that people arrive for work. It's a joke, and I think it's going on everywhere. Anyway, great show.
That's extraordinary. Laura, thank you very much for that. Laura's saying that she's got a friend who works in a prison, and the priority is not dealing with the drugs in the prison. Well, what is the priority then? You know, if you go into prison, you shouldn't be able to avail yourself of any drug that you'd like to take. It's supposed to be a place of penal putrefaction. You're supposed to be regretting what it is that you did on the outside to get in there in the first place. You're not supposed to be getting high off your face every day because you can get free drugs or cheap drugs or whatever it is. Absolutely extraordinary. That's on the news, of course, that 2 prisons in this country have now admitted that they've basically given up the skies to drones. And people are getting mobile phones delivered, drugs delivered, even food delivered, and weapons. I mean, for heaven's sake. Incredible. Let's talk to Joe Twyman, co-founder of the public opinion consultancy firm Delta Poll, because there's a couple of polls out today, and there's a big poll coming out tonight from YouGov, I think, on people's voting intentions. And we've got it on the front of the Times here, I should say, where Reform have now pushed the Tories into 3rd place. They're tied with Labour, effectively, who are falling faster than a stone in a pond. Let's find out from Joe how it's all going. Joe, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
Nice to talk to you. So Reform continue to march on Labour, continue to march up the polls as the Tories kind of sink further and further into the morass. What do you make of it all?
That's correct. This latest poll really reinforces the long-term trends that we've seen in pretty much all of the polling since the general election. That has seen a fall in Labour's position, an increase, significant increase in Reform's performance, and the Conservatives unable, it seems at least at the moment, to capitalise on Labour's failure and the success going to Reform instead. The key question now is what will happen over the next few weeks and months as we go into the local elections in May, which are, of course, the first real test, if you like, of Keir Starmer's government.
Yeah, what is actually happening in May? Because it's a bit of a confused picture, because I'm told that in Sussex, for example, and maybe some other parts of the country, the elections have been sort of suspended, if you like, because Labour wants to try and get their new form of government, local government, in place in some parts of the country, but not in all parts of the country. This is all down to kind of, you know, I don't know what the word is, but basically making, super kind of regions, if you like, rather than local councils.
Well, local elections are always complicated because it's never the case that the entire country goes to the polls at one time. You have different sections, different areas, and different levels of government that go to the polls, and that's what's happening. That's what's happening this year. And it's always difficult to work out exactly how that relates to the national picture. But nonetheless, it actually involves people going to ballot boxes and putting their cross next to a party and a candidate, and so that's why they're so important.
Yes, but why is it that some elections won't happen and some will? And do we yet know what those areas are?
Not that I'm aware.
Well, that's the problem. I can't find anyone that's aware, and we're only 4 months away from having these elections, and nobody seems to know what's actually happening.
Yeah, and I'm sure that inevitably there will be some teething problems with the new system as there inevitably are. But more widely, very few people are paying attention to the nuances of local government reform compared to the big issues such as the economy, particularly the cost of living, but also immigration, and that's the underlying data that is driving these polls that we're talking about today. And I think that's where Labour are really starting to feel the pinch. They will be disappointed at their performance in the voting intention, but voting intention does fluctuate depending on news events and things like that. But I think there'll be more widespread concern about the underlying data, not just around issues, but around things like leadership as well, where Keir Starmer has really seen his position relative to Kemi Badenoch, but also just in absolute terms, collapse in the time since he's been in Downing Street.
Yeah, exactly right. And I guess from Reform's point of view, in terms of intent to vote in a particular direction or another, they say an awful lot of the time that they think the system's unfair. They got more votes than Lib Dems, but they got many fewer seats, only 5 seats compared to Lib Dems 72, when they actually got more physical votes. I mean, what do they have to do in order to transfer the voting intention, if you like, into seats?
Well, what they need to do in basic terms is establish a more effective ground game, as geeks like me say. In other words, actually have people who are able to go out and knock on doors and get people to turn out to vote and go to the polling stations. Right. This is where the Lib Dems, for instance, have been extremely effective, which is why they were able to mop up so many seats based on a lower, as you say, share of the vote at the general election. And a lot of that begins actually with the local elections. To go back to what we were talking about, for a long time the Lib Dems were the party of local government. They had those people out there, and I'm sure that at least to some degree, Reform will be hoping to replicate that kind of foundation onto which they can build and head into a general election. But ultimately, the electoral system is particularly problematic for parties like Reform, not just Reform, but for other parties as well. We did have a referendum on it, and it was soundly defeated. I think it will be some time before it's considered again. And of course, even for Reform to be successful, they would need to benefit from the electoral system, and what we have found consistently is that those parties that benefit from it then tend to sort of gloss over the importance of reforming it.
Yeah, and I guess what they have to do is identify where they can win, because that's what Lib Dems did very well. When you talk about a ground game, they knew where they could target that would actually work for them, whereas Reform have come second, it would seem, in a lot of the places in the last election. How do they make that different?
Well, the interesting thing about that, of course, is that the Lib Dems have a much more targeted approach, and so they only tailor their appeal to particular areas, whereas Reform, at least up until this point, have been far more conscious of the idea of appealing to, as far as they can, certain groups within the entire country. They don't want to be simply regionally based, and they've talked before about how they don't want to appeal just to one group or the other. They want to appeal to lots of different groups. The downside with that is that you don't have regional hubs, and you can't concentrate on particular areas. Although it is worth pointing out that they are naturally more popular in some areas than others, and so it's about targeting. It's about identifying those areas where you can really perform and putting your resources into those areas. But that is difficult, and still with the electoral system you can have a situation where you come second in lots of places.
Yeah, right. Good to talk to you, Joe. Thanks very much indeed. Joe Twyman there, co-founder of the public opinion consultancy firm Delta Poll, on the news that basically Reform and Labour are pretty much neck and neck in the polls now. The Tories losing ground, as are indeed Labour. It's 26% Labour, 25% Reform, 22% Conservative, Lib Dems on 14, the Greens on 8, others on 5. So more success, really, for Nigel Farage. Coming up, we're going to be talking about AI. We're going to try and find somebody who can actually make sense of it all and tell us what it means, because Keir Starmer failed miserably yesterday to enlighten anyone about anything. Let's get a voice note from Christopher.
Good morning, Mike. Listen, all this nonsense with drones and mobile phones could be stopped in every prison in the country in 48 hours. Do the same as the Americans do. Put a radio signal blocker on the top of the building, and then nothing works. The drones won't work, the mobile phones can't get a signal. Job done. Have a great day.
Doesn't sound difficult, does it? I mean, we've already had 2 versions of that from people listening to this show, and yet the prison service apparently can't do anything about it, possibly because they don't care. Joe in Cornwall says, Mike, a few things seem to be pretty obvious. 1, Starmer doesn't write his speeches or tweets. They are clunky and superficial, repeating buzzwords. Number 2, Starmer doesn't decide on policies. If he did, he'd be able to answer journos' questions with context and substance. And number 10, the press office wouldn't have to issue corrections after every speech. And 3, his SPADs, special advisors, are very young without real-life experience, which explains the absolutism of his decisions and lack of systems thinking. You may be onto something there, Joe. All of those 3 things might be correct. Doesn't really matter, though, because even if there are other people doing all of the work behind the scenes, he's the guy that sells it. He's the guy that presents it. He's the guy that's supposed to give you the reason why you should be excited about something. And if he can't do that, then what's the point of him? Because if he's not doing any of the other things, if he's not doing any of the policies, if he's not doing any of the planning, if he's not doing any of the kind of, groundwork, his job simply is to sell it to the nation. And if he can't sell it to the nation, then he shouldn't be doing the job, should he? 7:36.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory at 7:38. We're here, of course, all the way through until 10 o'clock. Stuart in Perthshire says, "Morning, Mike. Could you honestly imagine Starmer in court? How could any juror stay awake?" Well, yeah, I can't imagine him in court because he doesn't appear to have... I mean, I know lots of barristers, right? I know lots of lawyers, all of whom I've seen performing in courtrooms, and they're very, very smart people. They're very clever, they're very engaging, and they are very good at persuading you about something that they're trying to prove to be the case, because it's their job to be persuasive, either to a judge or to a jury. Starmer couldn't persuade me to walk out the door. You know, he just couldn't persuade me to do anything. Why would you? Let's get a voice note from Sean.
Morning, Mike. Sean from Grimsby here. So Keir Starmer wants to ban free speech in pubs, and I'll tell you why. Because he hates the working class. He can't stand us, and here's why. Because when the left come out with all this stuff, whether it's trans nonsense, net zero nonsense, all this woke nonsense, it's the working class that sees straight through it. It's the middle classes and upper classes what absolutely embrace it, all in. Great show, Mike. Keep up the good work.
Sean, thank you very much indeed. We're going to speak to Rohit Talwar very shortly, a leading AI consultant. But first, let's get the Prime Minister's take on what it actually is.
I've seen this for myself as a leader of a public service. And this is entirely human. But new technology can provoke a reaction, a sort of fear, an inhibition, a caution, if you like. And because of the fears of a small risk, too often you miss the massive opportunity. So we've got to challenge that mindset. Because actually, the far bigger risk is that if we don't go for it, we're left behind by those who do.
Go for what? Risk what? Gain what? Why can't he tell us what it is? Let's see if Rohit can help us. Rohit, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
I'm sorry for being so kind of dense about this, but I'm sorry, I watched Keir Starmer's speech yesterday. I couldn't really grasp what it was that he was selling us. I couldn't really tell what he was going on about. He didn't do a very good job of it, did he?
Well, it depends on what you want. If you wanted him to give a tutorial on AI and how you interrogate, you know, huge amounts of data and how the algorithms work, then no, he didn't do that. But you wouldn't expect a Prime Minister to be doing that. But I think from a kind of independent perspective, I think he made the case that you need to, at every level, understand this technology now, start to make some time to see what it is and how it's penetrating our lives, how it can be used in business, and to understand that it is now, if you like, almost the only game in town in terms of big businesses and how they move forward. You can see what it's done to the valuations of the big technology companies. So if you take the likes of Microsoft and NVIDIA, who make the chips for AI, they're now worth more than the UK economy. So you see how big it is. If you take the big 6 tech companies, they're worth 18% of the entire global stock market, really based on their investments in this technology. And it is starting to penetrate every aspect of our lives. The most common way most of us are seeing it is through these tools called large language models, things like ChatGPT and Perplexity and Gemini from Google, which are like super-powered search engines. They can interrogate huge amounts of data, and they have these algorithms called machine learning algorithms that learn from that data, are providing more and more accurate insights to us, helping you plan, helping you write emails, helping you do the work that you do inside your organizations that can make things much more efficient. There's a next stage of this, which is where the leaders in artificial intelligence want to go, which is to create AI that's as smart as humans or smarter. And that's called artificial general intelligence or artificial superintelligence. And this really is an arms race between the big corporations and also nations to say, this will change the game. So I think it's the World Bank says it could add 1.5% to GDP every year if you embrace it and use it in your businesses. For the UK, that's £47 billion a year that you could add, which if you look at what this government is trying to do in terms of growing the economy, that would go a long way to achieving it. So
But how does that translate into what I would say is everyday speak that people can understand? You know, you can talk about big numbers. I mean, yesterday we were talking about £470 billion being boosted into the economy over the course of 10 years. But nobody's actually explained how and what the effect of that would be and how it would affect day-to-day operations for ordinary people.
Well, so if you break it down, that's 47 billion a year. And the way they see that coming is through people being able to do their jobs more efficiently because they're giving more of the work to what are called AI agents, which are like having really smart assistants that can do tasks and learn and keep.
Okay, well, let's take that one point then, and let's try and melt that down into how one person's job could be so much easier for them because of AI and why that would generate more money. Can you give me an example of somebody that would do that?
So let's say you're in marketing in an organisation.
Right.
And you've got a new product to launch. So you might start by doing some research about the marketplace. You might then create a plan to say, okay, how are we going to market this? You might then create your social media campaign. Now, that's a lot of effort. That might take you 2 or 3 weeks to do. But using these agents to do all these specific tasks for us, you could do all of that in a day.
So why do you need the marketing job then?
Well, you need that person to still do the creative thinking. But what it means is they can be more effective and spend more time coming up with the creative concepts, so you don't have some of the terrible ads we see. But all the way through business, you can see tasks that can be done more effectively. Now, it raises a very important point that you've made there, which is why do we need these people? And there is a huge challenge coming in that we probably won't need as many people to do these jobs. So there's a sort of backfill required to create the next generation of jobs, which is why in this 50-point plan they've come up with, there's a lot of focus on upskilling people to do the new jobs in the new businesses that are coming through. A lot of the announcements that were made yesterday from the companies investing sort of 14 billion plus were around creating new jobs to go with these AI data centers and AI infrastructure and new computing facilities and all of that. But you need a different type of skill set to the jobs that will be being, if you like, replaced by AI. So that's why there's quite a strong emphasis in this plan on upskilling people. And apologies if people don't understand it. The technologists aren't that bothered about whether we as individuals understand it. They're busy pushing forward. And it's
well, they might not be bothered about. Well, it might not be bothered about whether people understand it. But an awful lot of people I speak to are concerned about data and data mining and data selling and data collection and data forwarding. You know, they think that they own their own data and they don't think they should just give it away for free.
Well, you know, since people started using the internet, we've been giving our data away. And that's one of the things that's made the big tech companies so wealthy. The likes of Google have used our data, Facebook, to analyze it, to create new insights, to sell services, and to attract advertisers. And so that's been going on for a long time.
Yeah, but a lot of data hasn't been given to people like Google, right? Your personal health data, for example, has not been given to anyone.
Well, now that what's happening is a variety of companies are taking things like our health data and applying these algorithms called machine learning algorithms to draw insights and to, for example, be able to analyze millions of cases around the world of people with cancer and draw out insights and to identify conditions that a normal cancer doctor wouldn't see because they're so rare. So it's having very valuable benefits there. It is,
but it does have. I'm sure it does have valuable benefits. But there are also concerns about what the other side of those valuable benefits might be, which would be with people. You know, some people are not very happy about what Facebook does with their data. They leave Facebook. But if you're now going to enter a world where you can't leave your data anywhere, where somebody isn't going to do something with it, then I think there'll be concerns about that, and people will not necessarily consent to it. I mean, we still get asked in most cases if we consent to things. The way that AI is being talked about, it suggests that nobody's going to be asked.
Well, a couple of things. with our medical data that the data that's being given to these companies is anonymized, so you won't know whose data it is, and you don't need to know whose data it is to do that analysis.
Well, no, but that's not true, is it? Because if the NHS, for example, which is one of the examples that Keir Starmer's given, if the NHS is going to, streamline itself, rationalise itself, improve itself, the idea is that you will have diagnosis being done by AI. And that would involve not anonymising data, but it would involve your personal data being input into a data bank, surely.
Well, so to get the data set, to get the kind of, if you like, the information about all the different types of cases it could be, that's anonymised. And then it's taking your particular circumstances and comparing you and offering the doctor advice as to what type of cancer you might have. So, yes, there is that level of personal data, but when it goes into the system, what we're told is it's anonymised again. So in the same way...
But we can be told that, Rohit, but, I mean, I don't trust the government with anything at the moment. I wouldn't trust them with my data either.
Well, that's an issue there, then. That's about personal kind of...
Well, a lot of people feel the same way. A lot of people feel the same way. The last time the government tried to, computerise and digitalise health records, they spent £4.5 billion and it didn't work, and they had to abandon it.
Well, there's been countless failed IT projects in the health service.
Yeah, exactly.
It's such a complex organisation that it's hard to do. Going back to the point you're making about the likes of Facebook and Google, you can ask for your data to be anonymised and for them not to use it, but we're made to work very hard to tell them that. They don't make it easy for us to do that. And that is obviously a huge concern, that our data will be used in these things. It's that trade-off. Do you want free internet access? Do you want to be able to use these things for free? And they're saying, well, if you want them for free, the way you pay for it is by giving us your data. Yeah. So there's a trade-off there.
But we don't have free internet access because we have to pay for broadband, don't we?
It's not so much the internet access, it's using things like you need to pay for your broadband, obviously, but using the search engines, using all the social media tools that we use. There's so much that we use for free. And those companies would argue that the way they can provide it to us for free is by taking our data, aggregating it and using it to market all the nonsense you see popping up on your Facebook feed.
And you're right, it's nonsense. Anyway, listen, we've got to stop. We can talk all day about this, I'm sure. Rohit, good to talk to you. Thank you. Rohit Talwar, leading AI consultant. You already made more sense than Keir Starmer did in about 5 minutes. But it still leaves an awful lot of questions unanswered, it seems to me. As he says, the geeks who are in charge of all this just assume it's all going to be brilliant. Well, I've seen rollouts of so-called, innovative brilliance from governments. I've seen rollouts of things which haven't worked at all well, and I'm not at all convinced by this one way or another. Are you? 0344 499 1000. Coming up, Julian Jessup joins us, independent economist, a proper economist, not like Rachel Reeves, and we'll find out from him what the forecast is like for the collapse of the pound. This is talk.
Well, personally, I think we should be allowed to opt out of the NHS and have some form of, scheme where we buy our own healthcare and take ourselves out of the NHS. There's a lot of ways in which you can actually solve the NHS. As we know, Jeremy, central planning never has and never will work. And what the NHS now is a centrally planned beast. It's like an animal on the back of productive Britain, and it's killing us. So somebody's got to grasp the nettle and sort it out.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham. This, of course, is Talk, the home of common sense. Let's talk straight away to Julian Jessup, independent economist, a man who says things that actually tend to come true, unlike some economists, like Rachel Reeves, who says things that tend not to come true. Julian, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
So, the pound falls yesterday to a 14-month low. Rachel Reeves returns from China to what can only be described as a pretty bleak economic outlook. Where do you see it all going in the next week or two?
Well, I'll start with the pound. I still think this is mainly a story of the strength of the US currency rather than weakness of sterling. So if you look at the dollar across the board, it's strong against other currencies as well. So if you take the euro, it's actually at its lowest for more than 2 years. So we're not really being singled out in the currency markets, but we are now in the bond markets. And I think that's where the bigger problem lies. So the cost of government borrowing is continuing to rise, which is very worrying because that's going to make it almost impossible for Rachel Reeves to meet her fiscal rules without either cutting spending or raising taxes even further. So that's the big problem that she's got. I think the only way out of this is growth. Frankly, the markets are sick and tired of hearing all these promises about fiscal credibility and ironclad grip on the public finances. What they want to see is economic growth. And so far, we've seen very little that's encouraging here. I mean, there's some hope in the latest plans on AI, but those will take many years to come through. We need something bigger and bolder and sooner.
Yes, and we're going to see growth figures, I think, for November soon, aren't we, which are not likely to be very good.
Well, that's right. I think that, as you know, the economy basically stalled in the second half of last year. And I think it's no coincidence that was at the time that the Labour government took power. So to begin with, Labour ministers were sort of talking down the economy. You remember they were banging on about the worst economic inheritance since the war. And then the budget came along and that was even worse than people anticipated in terms of the tax increases and other increases in business costs. So I think the second half of last year is basically a write-off. We'll be at or very close to recession over that period. And the early part of this year isn't going to be any better. We haven't even had the main increases in tax in the budget. They don't come through until April. Right. We've got the prospect of a very tight spending review and probably a further increase in inflation as well, data that's also coming out this week. So in the near term, things look very gloomy.
Yeah, they do. And I mean, there doesn't appear to be any sign of growth at all anywhere in the economy. You know, every single business that I speak to is talking about contracting. Every single business organisation is saying that their members are either firing people or certainly not hiring people, and they're very much holding back on any kind of, innovative introduction of new products. Everything's kind of in a bit of what you might call a sea of calm.
That's right. I mean, there's no doubt that the budget and the other announcements isn't just the budget. It's things like the increase in national minimum wage, the increased regulation of the labour market generally, the uncertainty about energy policy. Yeah. All of these things have hammered business confidence. And I think that's very worrying. If I was trying to clutch at straws, there are a few things I would point to. So I think most people will still see their incomes rise faster than prices this year. I still think there's a good chance the Bank of England will cut interest rates more aggressively. And there will be some increase in public spending, which might provide some boosts to some parts of the economy. So I think the second half of the year might look a lot better than the first, but in the short term, at least, things look terrible. And you get a risk of a sort of downward spiral. You know, animal spirits are really, really important. Economists tend to run these models and plug numbers in, but they don't take enough account of business confidence in particular, also consumer confidence, that I think could be much more fragile if unemployment starts to rise sharply.
Right. And I'm going to ask you a yes or no question because we haven't got a lot of time. Will Rachel Reeves be Chancellor for the full term of the Parliament?
No.
Thank you. That's what I think. Julia Jessup, independent economist there, with a far more realistic account, I would say, of the situation regarding Rachel Reeves. She ain't going to make it. The skids are under her. She is absolutely and utterly on that luge downhill to despair. She's just come back from China to a front page that calls her a lame duck, and that's in the Daily Mail. John Rentoul is going to be here in the next hour. We'll find out from him what he makes of the state of play. This is Talk. I'm Mike Graham.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. 2 minutes past 8. The sun is up, ladies and gentlemen. The sky actually looks reasonably clear today. It's warming up a bit as well. If you have been freezing in the cold weather and the very, very minus temperatures that we've been having over the past few days, you'll be pleased to know that the temperature, I think, today is licensed to go up to about 8 or 9. Which makes it a lot less likely that you have to wear your big, heavy overcoat and you can perhaps prance around without worrying about freezing your fingers off. John Rentoul's coming up here, chief political commentator at The Independent. We also have a very good row round all the big stories of the day. Keir Starmer very much front and centre, of course, after yesterday's announcement about AI transforming the entire economy. £47 billion a year, they claim it's going to generate for the economy. Nobody's really quite sure exactly how. We spoke to an AI specialist in the last hour who did a slightly better job of explaining it than Keir Starmer, but I'm still not really convinced. I'm not really sure precisely how all of this is going to work. It's a bit like when they say, oh, you know, people not turning up to doctor's appointments cost the NHS £58 billion a year. And you go, well, how did you work that out? Where did you get that number from? In the same way, how are you going to get £47 billion worth of growth out of the economy just because somebody doesn't have to walk to the kettle and turn it on? You can hit a switch from back here. I don't understand. Maybe somebody else can explain it to me. Also, let's talk about the Labour law that threatens customers' free speech in pubs. According to the front page of the Times today, pubs could ban customers from speaking about contentious matters such as religious beliefs or transgender rights, because it may well be that it offends the person serving you in said pub, whether it be a waiter or a waitress or a bartender or somebody of non-binary nature bringing your food. I mean, I don't know what it means, but it certainly doesn't sound good to me. Let's have a listen to Keir Starmer, though, because here's a man who often doesn't know what he's talking about.
And as well as that, I'm delighted that the inspiring Nobel Peace, Nobel Prize winner...
Mobile prize winner. Yeah, it's a Nokia, ladies and gentlemen. How about this from Tony? Morning, Mike. He says, I was just wondering how to get nominated for one of these mobile peace prizes. Do I need to put my phone on silent or vibrate? What an numpty. My 4-year-old godson can speak better English than our Prime Minister. Keep up the great work. 2025, the year of common sense. That is exactly what it is. We'll also be talking about prisons and why drones have now taken over, delivering weapons, delivering phones, delivering drugs, and even food into prisons, and apparently the prison guards are incapable of stopping it. Absolutely unbelievable. 0344 499 1000. Also, Reform are up in the polls. They're now running pretty much neck and neck with Labour. More bad news for Keir Starmer, who says Rachel Reeves will definitely, absolutely still be Chancellor when they lose the next election. I don't think so. 0344 499 1000. I am Mike Graham. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. I got one from Daniel in Surrey here as well. Morning, Mike. I think I just passed Rachel from accounts in the arrivals hall at Gatwick. She looked very pleased with herself whilst carrying the results of some hard negotiating. Looked to me like a white plastic bag containing 1 chicken chow mein, 6 king prawn balls, special fried rice, prawn crackers and some sweet and sour sauce. Didn't she do well? Yeah, I mean, she might as well have just taken that back from the Chinese government, because the deal she got, £600 million worth of investment over 5 years, is 60 times less than they gave to Indonesia and 30 times less money than they gave to Peru. So, what does it all mean? There's only one man to ask, and it is, of course, the chief political commentator at The Independent, Mr. John Rentoul. John, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
Now, I just asked a yes or no question to Julian Jessup, an economist, and I said, will Rachel Reeves still be the Chancellor of the Exchequer when Labour lose the next election? He said no.
I agree with him. I don't think she will be, but I don't think she's going to go. I don't think she's going to go yet.
No, I mean, there seems to be a suggestion that she might go in March, at the end of March, or if not, she might go at the end of June. But the skids are definitely under her, aren't they?
No, I mean, I think, I think she probably doesn't have much longevity in her as a Chancellor, but I mean, I wouldn't expect her to go until next year or the year after that.
Really?
Well, I mean, it would be disastrous for Keir Starmer to sack her.
Yeah.
Because he would be criticising himself. They have they're joined at the hip. They fought the election on a joint programme, and her mistakes are his mistakes.
Yeah.
He, by sacking her, would be criticising himself and undermining himself, and it would be complete disaster for the government. It's not going to happen.
But don't you remember when he said country first, party second?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's hard to say that it would be in the country's best interest to change Chancellor at this point.
I think it would be definitely in the country's best interest, and she appears to be taking the country down a very dark and dismal road, and she's taken the economy into a very bad place. The pound is crashing against the dollar, and gilts and the yields on those gilts are higher than they've been for a very, very long time. In fact, since the last Labour government was in.
Well, as you know, we disagree on that, Mike, because you were suggesting last week that Liz Truss would be a better option as as Chancellor. I don't.
No, I didn't say that. No, I didn't say that, actually. No, we stopped arguing about it because you kept misinterpreting what I was saying. What I was actually saying was that Liz Truss had made some mistakes, but her mistakes were much more sort of criticised, shall we say, than Rachel Reeves. And what I find also interesting...
Because they were more serious mistakes.
But what I find also interesting is that you criticise Liz Truss, who wasn't the Chancellor. You don't criticise Kwasi Kwarteng, but you do say that Rachel Reeves is to blame for these problems rather than Keir Starmer. So you can't have it both ways. If you're going to criticise Liz Truss, then this must be Keir Starmer's fault.
No, yes, absolutely. I criticise... I mean, that's the point. That's why Keir Starmer shouldn't sack Rachel Reeves, because they're in it together. And, you know, when Liz Truss sacked Kwasi Kwarteng, he pointed out that, you know, that would be the end of her, and 11 days later it was. You know, chancellors and prime ministers have to hang and fall together.
They do, but I mean, it's the Liz Truss budget and the Rachel Reeves budget, which doesn't quite add up, does it?
Well, no, but I mean that's just shorthand, isn't it? I mean, you introduced Liz Truss into the equation by saying that the things in the situation in the gilt market was worse than it was under Liz Truss. I pointed out that it wasn't.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we don't want to repeat what we did last week because that would be boring. Because people listening last week already know that I won that argument. So let's move on to another one, which I could win today. All right. So you don't want to get rid of Rachel Reeves. What about Tulip Sadiq? You want to get rid of her?
Well, I think she should probably step down.
I think so.
There are enough questions being asked about her interests.
Yes.
But I mean, nothing actually untoward has been found so far. It just doesn't look great, and
but you're starting. But again, you can't keep going down that road of Keir Starmer's. You know, we did everything within the rules. Well, I don't know if she did everything within the rules, or we certainly do know that the Bangladeshi investigators are interested in talking to her about what she may have been involved in.
Yeah, I think that all that is awkward, and she ought to step aside from her anti-corruption role at least.
I mean, you would think so, or at least change the name of it to corruption rather than anti-corruption, which might be a bit more accurate. But yeah, I mean, so again, we're at this situation where you know he's being assailed on all sides, and it's probably now worse this week than it was last week.
Well, no. I mean, there was an opinion poll last week saying that Labour and Reform were level. You know, things continue to be extremely difficult for the government. I mean, I'm not going to pretend otherwise.
No. But I mean, what we said last week was that there doesn't appear to be anything that you can put in the, remember that episode of Friends when Joey decided to put together a list of things that were good about going out with somebody and bad about going out with somebody. You know, if you do something like that, in the good column you haven't got very much, but you've got quite a lot in the bad column.
I don't remember that episode.
It's very good. Yeah, it's very good.
I need to go back to it.
Yeah, you have to. It's basically how do you work out whether going out with somebody is a good idea, and so you list all the good things about them and all the bad things about them, and you come to a conclusion at the end.
Well,
so
this is what the British people did in July last year. They decided that continuing with a Conservative government was a bad idea.
Yeah.
They didn't actually know very much about what a Labour government would do.
No.
But they calculated that it couldn't be worse than what the...
Well, I can tell you exactly how they did that, because the only thing they had in the good column was they're not Tories. That was it.
I mean, I agree. It was a rather weak basis. It was a rather weak basis for such a huge majority.
Yes.
Which is a bit misleading. And, you know, there are undoubtedly voters, I mean, the opinion polls tell us this, who regret that decision and who've decided that actually the Labour Party could be worse than the Conservatives in government. Although I think that's a bit of a stretch, because the Conservatives had run out of steam and run out of...
they had. Yeah, I mean,
they left a terrible legacy to the Labour government, and no wonder the Labour government's having trouble struggling with dealing with it.
I don't think there's any doubt about that, and you're right. I mean, I would agree with you on this, that you know, the infrastructure of this country has been, you know, hopelessly neglected over time, that the Tories were in. You know, the prison service, the police, the NHS. You know, I'm not going to deny any of that, because the Tories were absolutely and utterly responsible for allowing much of it to run to rack and ruin because they didn't pay attention. But by the end, my feeling about them was that they were less damaging to the country than Labour, because they'd kind of stopped doing anything. They just weren't really introducing anything, which wasn't ever going to last long. But so now Labour have come in and made it all a bit worse, though, because all the things that they have tinkered with, they haven't improved.
Well, I mean, I hate to agree with you.
I know.
But certainly, certainly, if I were looking for cabinet ministers to sack, I would be looking at what Bridget Phillipson is doing to our schools, rolling back a successful bipartisan agreement about what makes schools better over the past 20 years. I'd be looking at what Ed Miliband is doing to our energy policies, and I'd be looking at what Angela Rayner's doing to the labour market. I mean, gumming it up with more regulation and more so-called employment rights, which I think are not in the interests of actual employees. So, you know, if you're looking for cabinet ministers to sack, I mean, Rachel Reeves is actually doing broadly the right thing. I mean, I know you disagree with some of her policies, and I would go for a different mix of taxes to raise. But I would be looking at other cabinet ministers first.
Yes, and I think that's a good point. But equally, I mean, the latest news from Rachel Reeves' department is that they're going to go after the civil service, they're going to go after government departments, and they're going to try and slash spending in those departments, which, as you know, is notoriously difficult to do.
Well, yes, and we're also getting an awful lot of the first resort of scoundrels in government is to say they're going to attack government waste.
Yeah.
I mean,
next it'll be bonfire of the Quangos, won't it?
I know it is all feeble stuff, and I do think just plucking figures out of the air and saying we're going to save billions from the welfare budget. I mean, easy to say. And it would be easy for me to come on here and say, oh yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
But in practice, it's just not. I mean, you know, welfare is a really difficult problem, and it probably will cost more in the short term to solve it. Only I don't get a sense that you know the government's got a grip on that either.
No.
Even though Liz Kendall is a fine minister who I'd want to keep.
I mean, the other problem, as you say, with Angela Rayner and these employment rights is on the front page of the Times today, which is that pubs could ban customers from speaking about contentious matters such as religious beliefs or transgender rights over fears of falling foul of these new Labour workers' rights reforms. Effectively, you know, they want to protect workers from harassment, which is fair enough. That's one thing.
Oh, I see.
But not actually from overhearing a conversation that they don't like. I mean, that's ridiculous.
That is absurd. And the idea that should be in employment rights legislation, I mean, that would be a serious curtailment of free speech, and I doubt if that's going to happen. I mean, I presume there's some poor drafting in some of that legislation. I mean, that bill is an absolute mess.
Yeah,
needs to be rewritten from start to finish, if not just dropped altogether.
Right.
But I mean, that kind of stuff reminds me of you know, notices. I mean, I went to Sri Lanka a very long time ago, and there used to be notices in cafes saying discussion of religion and politics is forbidden.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, and that was a country on the brink of a civil war. I mean, that kind of thing is totally alien to
yeah, it's straight out of 1984, isn't
it? Shouldn't be allowed here. I assume there's not much to that story, but.
Are you suggesting my colleagues on the Times are flamming a story up just to put it on the front page? It's a shocking indictment.
Possibly. I've never heard of journalists doing that, but if that is what is going on, then I think they should turn it down.
Listen, let's go back finally to the grooming gang story, because we talked about it a lot last week. You didn't think it was good to have an inquiry. We've now got one Labour MP who does think it's a good idea. Andy Burnham also thinks it's a good idea. And people are starting to say to me that they think Starmer will somehow shift slightly on this and do something. It might not be a full-on inquiry, but he's going to do something.
Yeah, no, I think that would be a perfectly sensible way of dealing with it, would be to have a very limited inquiry to deal with issues that people feel were not dealt with in the Alexis J inquiry.
Yeah.
I mean, I personally don't think that that you know, public inquiries are. I mean, they're almost never a good thing. I mean, they're almost never required. They take too long. They spend a lot of public.
They're too broad as well.
Relitigating decisions that were taken in the heat of the moment and all the rest. But I mean, I don't have any objection to a very short, targeted look at some of the outstanding issues, if there are any.
Yeah, well, there are plenty, and I think that's a good idea.
Well, you say that. I think there's a lot of enforcement that needs to be done of findings of previous inquiries.
Yeah, well, there are also plenty of people that need to be asked questions about why they didn't do certain things when they should have done them, and I think that would be fair enough. But let me ask you one final one. We got a new president coming in on Monday, inauguration, Donald Trump, 47th president of the United States of America. Keir Starmer's not been invited. What do you make of that?
Yeah, well, I think their relationship's rather difficult, isn't it? Donald Trump didn't seem to take very well to the idea of having Peter Mandelson as the British ambassador.
Yeah, can't blame him for that.
Washington. Well, I thought I could actually. I thought that was actually I thought that was a sign of respect. To appoint someone so eminent and so qualified in matters of international.
Yeah, but I think the point is that they had said to the UK that they were quite happy with the person that was already there, and so effectively by not doing what they had suggested they do, it's a kind of a snub to them, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Although we can't, we can't decide our ambassador on the basis of what another government wants. But yeah, we should take that into account. So that hasn't gone very well. I mean, I think their relationship is off to a rocky start.
Yes.
But I think the consolation in all this is that Donald Trump's bark is worse than his bite, and I think practicalities will continue to be worked on at a lower level.
Yes, I dare say. Good to talk to you, John. Thank you very much indeed. John Rentoul, chief political commentator at The Independent there. Let's get a voice note from Sam.
Morning, Mike. So, Keir John Starling Ping. So he wants AI, does he? Doesn't that stand for already an idiot? Why do we need an artificial idiot? Come on, Keir. Stop giving us loads of sound bites and actually do something good for the country and your people. Stop looking for headlines so you can have your like box ticked. So I'm going to flurry to the ideology of the day. It's ridiculous. Tell him to grow a pair, please, Mike. Great show. Keep it up.
Very well said, Sam. AI, Mobile Peace Prize. This is Talk.
Sleepy Joe Biden proved to everyone that he has what it takes to be president. So now we have a new victim to defeat, Kamala Harris, L-Y-I-N apostrophe. Take a look at what happened. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs. The people that came in, they're eating the cats. Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 24 minutes past 8. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. In order for my rights to be respected, says Celia, I'll probably be treading all over yours. Stick to democracy. A Human Rights Act should be what the majority of us want it to be. I don't care what people say about me, as long as they aren't violent. I think that's fair enough. Mike, on AI, why did Starmer not speak to Musk, a man who is on the top of his game, says Jim. Well, apparently he says that he will work with Elon Musk, even though he was criticising him over Jess Phillips. I think we've got a clip. Let's have a listen.
I'm really pleased that very highly successful players within the sector have come out very strongly in support of the plan that we've put on the table in the last day or two. We will work with anybody in this sector, whether it's Elon Musk or anybody else. We're a government that's focused on being number one when it comes to AI and working with all.
Well, there's a bit of a problem, though, with the electricity cost of AI and everything about that issue. Ross Clark is here with us. We're going to talk to him in a moment. He's got a big piece in The Sun this morning. He's got a voice note first, though, from Mark.
Morning, Mike. It's Mark in Lancashire. I'm really not sure about this AI malarkey. There's got to be a limit to what it can do. I've just seen a tweet from Bridget Phillipson where she said that they're going to use AI to put more teachers at the front of classes in schools. How's it going to do that? That's just not physically possible, is it? I mean, people have got to interview them. People have got to take the teachers on, put them in positions. You can use it as a training aid, but that's about it. It seems a bit ridiculous to me. The only way the AI can make our lives better is if we use it to replace all these Muppets in the House of Commons. That's my opinion. Get rid of them all, replace them with robots and AI, and I think we'd be a lot better off.
Yeah, well, you may well be right, Mark, but I'll tell you what, the most important thing here, and Ross Clark's about to tell us why, is the cost of the electricity that's going to have to run all of these data centres, because it is prodigiously expensive in this country, because we have the most expensive electricity pretty much in the world. Ross, a very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. Hi.
So, here we are. I mean, everybody's talking about artificial intelligence. I've yet to find anybody who can really kind of define what it is, how it's going to be so useful to us, how it's going to generate 47 billion pounds every single year for 10 years for the economy, and how this great sort of, you know, revolution is going to change our world.
Well, it's going to fill our potholes, remember, and it's going to make our civil servants increase their productivity by the tune of 1.5% a year, according to Starmer. Well, I mean, civil servants are actually less productive now than they were 28 years ago when Tony Blair came to power, producing less per hour. Now, that's in spite of the internet, in spite of smartphones, iPads, and amazing breakthroughs in technology we've had in that time, as civil servants have become less productive. So why they should suddenly become more productive as a result of AI, I'm afraid I'm extremely sceptical.
No, it's beginning to sound to me like this is the sort of magic bullet that every politician has been praying for since the time immemorial. You know, that how are you going to make life better for everybody? AI. Well, you know, how are you going to improve productivity? AI. How are you going to get more teachers into schools? AI. How are you going to get the roads more easy to navigate and less, busy with congestion? AI. You know, it's going to be this straightforward answer. But if you actually ask them what it is, it's a bit like net zero. They can't define it.
Yeah, well, it takes me back to Tony Blair and his government. Of course, then the time the internet was going to be the answer to everything. And but actually, when Tony Blair was put on front of a computer, he actually struggled to order his wife Cherie a bunch of begonias online.
Right.
And then he went on to, commission that ill-fated NHS IT system, if you remember, which cost taxpayers £10 billion
and didn't work.
So, yeah, of course, AI will be the future as the internet was the future, but that doesn't mean that the government's going to make a good fist of taking advantage of it. And as you say, it's just become a sort of bit of a get-out clause, hasn't it? We're suffering a stagnant growth, so Starmer will get in front of the cameras and spout things about AI, and it's going to be the answer to everything, whereas he probably doesn't really understand very much about it at all.
Which explains why he can't explain it, because that's always a giveaway, isn't it? But your piece today also points to the fact that electricity cost in this country is so prodigiously high that we will not be competitive on the world market for artificial intelligence, regardless of what Keir Starmer says, that we are somehow the world leader in it, because the price of electricity per kilowatt in the USA, 6.48 pence, whereas in Britain it's 25.85 pence. That's quite a disparity.
It is, and AI is a tremendous consumer of power. It's easy to sort of overlook that, given that, doesn't have the sort of, appearance of steel industry or chemical industry, doesn't have big chimneys and that sort of thing, but it is actually extremely power hungry. And the International Energy Agency calculated a couple of years ago that AI, cryptocurrency and data centers between them are consuming 2% of world power. That's more power than is consumed by Germany. So a tremendously power-hungry industry, and yet Keir Starmer's forgotten two things. Firstly, the price of UK electricity, as you just mentioned there. UK industries are paying, so 4 or 5 times as much for their power as are American companies. The other thing is the quantity of power we got. We just simply do not have the capacity for a massive expansion in AI at the moment. I mean, you take West London, for example, there's so many data centers being constructed there in recent years, and they've consumed so much of the capacity of the grid that housing developers have been told, well, sorry, that there's just no grid capacity for you to build new homes, and won't be till 2035. Right. We're importing 16% of our power last year was imported, and this is all because we've closed down the coal power stations, and we haven't constructed a viable national grid without it. We're trying to sort of live on Ed Miliband's wind turbines, which of course are intermittent and so on. And we've got now commercial users of power being told, at peak times when there's not enough wind energy being generated, well, sorry, turn off your, we'll pay you to turn off your industrial plant and so on. Well, a dynamic AI industry is not going to want to operate in that kind of environment.
No, quite. And so they'll just go somewhere else, as indeed you might expect. And also, as the Sun points out today, the other sort of opposition, I suppose, to this AI revolution will be the unions, because the one thing that you know about this government is that in the course of the next year or two, unions will be much more powerful than they were back in July of last year when the Labour government were elected. We've already seen strike action resulting in them all getting a pay rise in the railway area and in the NHS as well. And basically, the Sun's leader says today, is this union-funded government really ready to force the union Luddites to embrace the future? The answer to which is probably not really.
No, well, if you're going to incorporate AI into civil service, other parts of the public sector, it's going to require changes in working practices. And, what have we had? The experience we've had of this government so far, back in July, nodded through these massive pay rises to train drivers, junior doctors and so on, and asked absolutely nothing in return in terms of changing working practices. Yeah. We still have guards on some trains. Well, though, that job was effectively made redundant back in the 1860s when signalling, railway signalling technology improved, we still have this rostering problem where train drivers, train guards and other staff are under no compulsion to work on Sundays. And so the rail company has to beg them to do so. Well, I mean, if you're not going to ask, if you're not going to demand that unions agree to change those kind of make those simple changes to working practices, I mean, how are you going to sort of persuade them to accept AI doing part of their job?
Yeah, exactly right. So, I mean, this revolution, as it was announced yesterday, has kind of not exactly hit the ground running. It's kind of just hit the ground, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's important to note here that the UK is actually, at the moment, has the third biggest AI industry in the world. It's a long, long way behind America. But, we actually do have a reasonably healthy AI industry at the moment, which I'd say has developed in spite rather than because of government policy. But, if you want it to expand, you're going to have to solve those problems of the infrastructure, the grid infrastructure. You're going to have to bring down energy costs.
Yeah.
And, we're also going to have to look at those sort of national insurance contributions, which has just sort of killed off recruitment, job creation, because it's added so many costs onto employers.
And in terms of when all of this sort of starts happening, I mean, a lot of people tell me, well, we're already using AI for all sorts of things already, so, we kind of are already underway. But I'm just struggling to explain it to the people listening to this show and watching this show, and I think, like me, they're kind of all a bit baffled as to what it all means and how their lives are going to be changed as a result.
Well, I mean, AI has, obviously very, very large number of applications. You think about the potholes, for example. Starmer was yesterday claiming it would help our councils mend potholes. Well, where AI might be helpful is where it some sort of learn the patterns of where potholes are being developed, are going to develop, and, enable highways departments to schedule highways improvements, resurfacing before potholes develop.
Yeah.
But I mean, at the present, we have potholes lying there for years and years after they've been reported to the public.
Yes.
And still haven't been filled. And you think, well, it's not AI's the problem here. The problem is sort of a lack of tarmac gangs, a lack of men in donkey jackets with steaming buckets of bitumen. And, of course, councils seem to be more interested in spending their money on diversity and inclusion and all that kind of stuff than on sort of actually physically doing
this is
work.
it. I mean, the idea that AI somehow helps the pothole problem, as you say, is only good enough if the people who are actually filling in the potholes are still doing their job, because there's only today in the Telegraph an investigation has revealed that up to 82% of the miles of local roads flagged as in need of maintenance have been ignored by councils all of last year. Left unrepaired, those holes are now at record levels because basically there's nobody doing it. So it doesn't matter whether AI is reporting it, it doesn't matter whether AI is measuring it. If nobody's filling in the potholes, you've still got potholes at the end of the day.
No, exactly. I mean, the roads are in better condition before we had an internet, let alone AI or anything else. I say it's tarmac we need. I say, if you got highways departments were on top of potholes, on top of road maintenance, then AI would have a function in, enabling the most efficient scheduling of repairs. But I say, at the moment, the whole system is failing because we're simply not putting in the money into the sort of actual physical repair of potholes. And until we do that, then AI is not going to help us one bit.
No, quite. Ross, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Ross Clark, columnist in The Sun. He's in The Sun today on page 10, writing all about AI. How will we power the AI revolution with no power? And I think it's a pretty good question. You can find that in The Sun today. Let's get a voice note from James on NHS Waste.
Morning, Mike. Just regarding the NHS. My mum was just retired from the NHS, 40 years. So she's done her bit, bless her. And I was talking to her the other night and she was saying there's so many managers now, Mike. I mean, you've got a manager for bloody teaspoons, a manager for tea bags. Oh, it's outrageous, Mike. And that Pratt yesterday talking about AI will solve the NHS problems. Blah, 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 blah. No, mate, the NHS, you don't need AI to solve the NHS problems. Stop throwing money at it. Just employ decent people.
Yeah, and just don't employ so many people doing jobs that they don't need to do. Exactly right. John says this, morning, Mike, someone needs to tell Rachel Reeves' face that the Prime Minister has full confidence. It's so long now, it's in danger of dragging in the potholes. Absolutely right. Take 38.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham. This is, of course, a Talk, and we will be here with Morning Glory all the way through until 10 o'clock when Julie Hartley-Brewer will join us. Doug says this, John Rentoul today listed 4 ministers that should get sacked before Rachel from accounts. How bad must they be if Reeves is only number 5 on the list of those who should be sacked? Laughable and depressing in equal measure. And Simon says perhaps Starmer could use AI to undertake an inquiry into grooming gangs. Well, do you know what? He's going to be talking to the leader of Iraq today, believe it or not, and which will involve a conversation about the small boats. Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani is meeting Sir Keir Starmer, and they're going to announce a £12.3 billion export package during their visit. Well, let's get a voice note from Pat.
Good morning, Mike. Patty from Coulston here. I just wanted to pick you up on one thing, that, you know, saying that Starmer said country first and party second. He didn't actually say which country, did he? Come on, be fair. Anyway, great show. Bye.
Yeah, Patty, you're quite right. Maybe he meant Iraq. Or France, or, you know, certainly not America. He's not going there, is he? Let's talk to Philip Ingram, former senior military intelligence officer, see what he makes of it all. Philip, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
So, I'm not quite sure why the Iraqi Prime Minister's come to Downing Street, but it's an interesting one at this point in time, isn't it? They're talking about having a bespoke returns agreement between the UK and Iraq and some kind of export package deal. I don't know what that means, really.
It is. Well, you know, there's a large number of the individuals that come across the channel by boat come from Iraq. And you know, this is part of the Prime Minister's desire to try and get people sent back to their home country again, in the same way the Tories did with the Albanians.
Right. But isn't Iraq one of the places that they can't get sent back to? Because if they claim that they're suffering from persecution for one reason or another, whether they're gay or whether they're, you know, politically not acceptable to the Iraqi regime, they can't be sent back.
Well, it's one of the places that we can send people back to because we've got diplomatic relations with Iraq.
Yeah.
We can't to Syria at the moment. It's almost impossible to Libya. We can't to Afghanistan. So Iraq is one of the places where we could get people sent back to if the left-leaning pinko lawyers won't stop individuals who have got minority claims. Most of them aren't true, but minority claims from stopping them from being put onto the returns flights.
No, sure. Well, we'll see what comes out of it, but, I mean, it just seems a bit of an odd thing to do. I mean, the problem with this government at the moment, they seem to be sort of prioritising the wrong things. You know, there's an awful lot of stuff that you could be doing to stop the small boats and to stop the gangs, but I don't know whether this is going to make any difference.
Yeah, I don't know whether it's going to make any difference whatsoever. You know, the government has announced a greater number of returns than the Tory party did beforehand. But those returns were mainly individuals whose visas that had been legally obtained had run out.
Yes.
And from what I understand, and I haven't confirmed this, they've been offering them £3,000 to send them back home again. So, you know, you let your visa run out, instead of booking a return flight, you just wait until the government comes and taps you in the shoulder, gives you £3,000 and sends you home again. That's quite a good way of getting home and saving money for students and others.
Yeah, I think that's true. Let's talk about President Biden. He's only got a few more days left as president. Donald Trump becomes the new 47th president on Monday. No Keir Starmer, of course, at the inauguration. But he's hoping, I think, to get a deal done in Israel with Hamas. Let's have a look.
On the war between Israel and Hamas, we're on the brink of a proposal that I laid out in detail months ago, finally coming to fruition. I have learned in many years of public service to never, 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 ever give up.
Indeed. He says he's never going to give up, but, I mean, he is actually giving up in a few days' time. Whether or not this deal is done before he leaves, one would imagine, I think, that this has very much got the footprint of Donald Trump on it, hasn't it?
Oh, very much so. You know, Donald Trump has said quite categorically to Hamas that if the hostages aren't released by the time he's inaugurated on Monday, then all hell will break loose. So I think it's within their interests to do this and do it now. Now, Biden's peace deal has the hostages being released in increments. But, you know, what's striking me with this is if Hamas is still in a position where they know where the hostages are, where they can still make decisions on the ground, you know, their infrastructure is still there. No wonder Israel's continuing to prosecute its operation against the Hamas operatives.
Yeah, indeed. And Hamas, as a rule, though, because we're worried about them, obviously, and we were talking earlier on to a former Israeli government official who said, you know, the worry is that whatever deal Biden does, it might allow Hamas to still continue to operate. And obviously their preferred situation would be that Hamas is no longer able to operate at all.
Well, it's not just the Israelis' desire for that. You look at the number of Middle East countries that have opened their borders to Palestinian refugees. You can add it up with no fingers because none of them have done it. You know, Hamas grew out of the Muslim Brotherhood, and you know, they almost destabilized Egypt many years ago. The Egyptian Gaza border has been closed ever since all of this has gone on. So they are a recognised terror organisation that not just scares the West, but scares other Middle East countries.
Yeah, absolutely right. Good to talk to you, Philip. Thank you very much indeed. Former Senior Military Intelligence Officer Philip Ingram there on the news that there could be a peace deal in the offing, which could see the hostages all being freed before Donald Trump becomes the new president, which, of course, he said must happen. And if it does happen, then I think we will be very, very thankful indeed. Obviously, having to watch the ridiculous shenanigans that David Lammy's been involved in while he's been over there, very much criticised by the Israeli government. We've got much more to do. Coming up, Ash Regan is going to be here. We're going to talk about Nicola Sturgeon, who rather unexpectedly and surprisingly announced the end of her marriage yesterday.
Starmer. I mean, now we seem to have the perfect storm. This government can't cut taxes. In fact, they've raised them. This government are now saying they're going to be ruthless public spending cuts. They seem to have based their entire economic sort of setup on growth, but quite how last October's budget does anything for growth when it's single-handedly attacking anybody with a small business is beyond me. And he found himself today having to defend Rachel Reeves.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. 10 minutes to 9. We will be very, very soon in the final hour of the show. Julie Hartley-Brewer here, of course, just before 10 to tell us what's coming up. The sun is blazing across the London skyline. It looks like a rather nice day again, I must say. Very, very pleasant indeed. I've got tickets for Mickey Flanagan and Peter Kay, says Mal up in Liverpool. He said, should I not go in case they upset me? Yeah, well, you can always report them to the government and have them all arrested and locked up for a very long time indeed until they're very, very sorry. Yeah, that's about free speech, isn't it? Apparently you can't say what you want in the pub, which is bad news for me. It may be bad news for Ash Regan as well, MSP for Edinburgh Eastern for the Alapa Party. Ash, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
So, yesterday, in what can only be described as a very sort of low-key announcement, but which didn't really surprise anybody, Nicola Sturgeon and her husband Peter Murrell have decided to end their marriage in the midst of an embezzlement probe. She says, basically, she wanted to tell everybody else what they knew and what many of her friends knew for a very long time. It's a curious way to announce it, wasn't it?
Well, the timing is, of course, always interesting with these type of announcements, but there had been a little bit more going on over the weekend, which you may have seen as well. Nicola had given an interview where she seemed to be saying some things about Alex Salmond, you know, saying that he wasn't a very nice person to work with and that she had sort of, I believe she was saying something along the lines of that she'd sort of warned him leaving her life, 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Since Alex Salmond is now dead and he cannot respond to any kind of allegations about him, his family were quite distressed by that, and his wife Moira put out a statement to that effect. Nicola then received, quite a bit of backlash, I think it's fair to say, on the social media platforms for doing that. And then a day or so later, she releases this statement. So it certainly moved that on a bit, if you like.
Yes.
But I would imagine there's something in here to do with her creating a sense of distance from her soon-to-be, I guess, ex-husband.
Yes, and soon-to-be ex-husband, who is, of course, under investigation, as indeed is she, in this very long-running police investigation into the SNP and missing funds and all kinds of different shenanigans, which involved, of course, having their house searched as well, didn't it?
Yes, that was very public. The Peter Murrell was actually charged with embezzlement quite a long time ago now. It's well over a year. So I think there is a sense in Scotland that really this case should be coming to some sort of a conclusion now, and we should, understanding as the members of the public, I think, are very keen to know what might be happening with this. But so far, nothing more's happened.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fascinating piece in the Mail today down here, tantalising clues into what really lies behind the sudden breakup of the very odd couple who ruled Scotland with an iron fist. And it is a kind of pretty ignominious end for her, really, isn't it? Considering that only a few years ago she was considered to be one of the great leaders of the Western world. She was, along with people like Jacinda Ardern and Justin Trudeau, thought to be the new funny vanguard of sort of the left in a way, and it all fell apart so quickly.
Well, she was a very successful politician. Nobody could argue with that. She won election after election. And she was at, the height of her powers for quite a long time, really, in a political context. But they say, don't they, that all political careers end in failure.
Yeah.
And this is a perfect example of that. However, I think the interest and the potential wrongdoing that is hanging over the Scottish National Party, and perhaps linked to Peter, perhaps it goes further. That is something that I don't think many politicians would be, want to have as part of their legacy.
Yeah. And I mean, you may or may not want to get into this particular scenario, but there's been an awful lot of rumours about Nicola Sturgeon's private life, which has suggested that she hasn't really had a proper marriage to her husband for quite a long time. She's good friends with Val McDermid. There's talk of her having another house that exists somewhere in the central belt of Scotland. I mean, is she ever going to sort of come out and talk about that, do you think?
I have no idea. There's certainly rumours abound about certain people in Scottish politics, and Nicola would certainly be one of them. I don't know any more about the detail of that.
But, her legacy will be what then? Because you say she was a very successful politician, but she was a very successful politician until she made what many might regard as a sort of fatal error of getting into a coalition government with the Greens and Patrick Harvey, which was the beginning of the end, really, wasn't it?
I would say so. I didn't vote for that. So they released the numbers afterwards, and obviously the politicians got a vote, the parliamentary group, both at Westminster, at that time there was a lot of them, and the ones at Holyrood, and also the membership. And apparently 95% of the SNP voted for that deal, but I was one of the 5% that didn't, because I could see the problems ahead with it. In terms of politics, if you are a successful politician, you reach the height of your career, which in the case of Scottish politicians would be becoming First Minister, and you maintain that position for a long time, you are, I think it's objectively a successful politician. However, in the case of the Scottish National Party, the job of the leader of the Scottish National Party is not necessarily to just become a successful politician. The job there is to get Scotland to becoming an independent country. It's to get Scotland, to become away from the UK, a country in its own right, and she failed dismally on that count.
Yes, and the landscape for Scotland now is different as well since she left, because it looks as though Labour might be making a resurgence. I know you guys are hoping that doesn't happen, but what does it look like for you in 2026 when the Scottish Parliament elections are taking place? Will Labour become the number one party again in Scotland?
Well, it was looking very like the Labour Party were going to do better. They certainly were looking better in the polls. And then Starmer took office in London. And obviously, he's only been in power there for about 6 months. And he's made a series of disastrous decisions, which have led to Labour sort of dropping in the polls. And Scottish Labour are not immune to that either. They're come out and distance themselves from some of the policies. In some cases, they're diametrically opposed to some of the policies that Starmer has taken on. So you can see there's confusion there. They're not linked, and a sense that having a Labour government in London, which I think Scottish Labour were desperate for, hasn't turned out to be quite the blessing that they thought it would be. So yes, at the moment, the SNP are running a minority administration. We do have the budget coming up shortly. The Labour Party have indicated that they'll abstain, which means the budget will pass. So they seem to be managing to run a minority administration at the moment. My preference is that happens. My view was that in a parliament that was set up really to cater to minorities, and it was meant to be on more of the European style, not like Westminster, where it was a parliament that had lots of smaller parties all working together for the common good of Scotland. It hasn't always worked out like that. And when the SNP were in a majority administration, as you rightly say, with the Green Party, I felt that meant that the government had to listen to the public. So that was things like, the bottle return scheme, which cost an awful lot of money and hasn't really been resolved. Gender reforms, which the public hated, but the Parliament pushed it through anyway. It had to be, in the end, it was stopped by the Conservatives in London, and a whole myriad of other things. So my view is it's much better when governments have to seek agreement across the Parliament. It makes for better policy, and in the end, I think better legislation comes from that.
Yeah, I think so. Good to talk to you, Ash. Thank you very much indeed. Ash Regan, MSP for Eastern Edinburgh Alpha Party there. The statement from Nicola Sturgeon, some people have said, of course, that she has now finally achieved some level of independence. She didn't get it for the country, but she got it for herself. To all intents and purposes, we've been separated for some time, she said, and we feel it is time now to bring others up to speed with where we are. It's kind of an odd thing to say, isn't it? But, that's the end of Nicola Sturgeon. How will she be remembered? Probably not very fondly by anyone. And it is pretty low to start attacking and continuing to attack Alex Salmond now that he's no longer with us. Pretty bad news. Coming up in the next hour, we've got much more to do. Of course, we'll be speaking to Gareth Davis, MP, Shadow Exchequer Secretary. Annabel Denham is here as well from The Telegraph. This is Morning Glory. Let's do it.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 2 minutes past 9. I'm Mike Graham. We're into the final hour, and we've got a great hour for you. We're going to speak to Gareth Davis, Shadow Financial Secretary to the Treasury. Annabel Denham is here, Deputy Comment Editor for The Telegraph as well. James Ball, Global Editor at the Bureau of Investigative Journalism, is going to talk about tech firms mining NHS archives in a bid to fuel the AI revolution. We've been trying to still find out exactly how this AI revolution is going to salvage our economy. Nobody seems to be able to answer that particular question at the moment. Maggie Oliver is also going to be joining us, former Detective Constable at Greater Manchester Police, and of course the grooming gangs inquiry is still very much on the cards. A lot of talk now that Sir Keir Starlin might actually change his mind and order an inquiry. Charlie Mullins joins us as well. He's just announced he's going to become a Reform UK candidate. The big story this morning, though, is still Rachel Reeves. She's come back from China and she has presented with the front pages this morning, basically saying the skids are under her and her job is very much hanging by a thread. But let's hear what the Prime Minister has to say.
Rachel Reeves is doing a fantastic job. She has my full confidence. She has the full confidence of the entire party.
Well, that's all right then. Sounds a bit like the football club owner, doesn't it, who says, oh, yeah, we've got full confidence in the manager, shortly before he gets sacked. That's what it sounds like to me. Also, of course, we'll be hearing later from Keir Starmer on the Mobile Peace Prize. He's not quite sure who he wants to give it to. He's not quite sure why he wants to give it away. He doesn't even really know what it is. Well, who can blame him? Because I don't know what he's talking about either. Meanwhile, of course, we've got the other story, front page of the Times today, which suggests that your free speech is going to be pretty much impoverished in the coming weeks and months, because Angela Rayner has got her mitts on the new workers' rights programme, in which basically people who work in pubs and restaurants will be empowered to complain about something they've overheard you saying, which has upset them or possibly offended them. So pubs, they say, could ban customers from speaking about contentious matters such as religious beliefs or transgender rights. And John Rentoul was here earlier. Last time he said he saw a sign like that, it was in Sri Lanka when they were in the middle of a civil war. Brilliant. One from Mark, who says, has John Rentoul taken a truth serum or had an epiphany? He was talking sense for minutes. He was. Unbelievable. Kept agreeing with me as well. It's what goes on, you see. The world of common sense is coming home to roost at the home of common sense, because this is the year of common sense. Let's face it, 2025. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Let's get a voice note, shall we? Here's Phil on AI.
Morning, Mike. Phil from Hertfordshire. Mike, I had a chat with the AI chat GPT, and I asked it, where'd you get all your information from? And he says, well, I get all my information from databases that's actually made available to it.
Yeah.
I said, well, are you up to date? And it said, no, all my information is current up to the 2021. So AI is only capable of giving us information, data, and producing stuff relative to the data that is actually provided. So the question is, who provides that data?
Yeah.
Therefore, can AI be controlled?
Well, this is exactly right. It can be. There's no question. Because AI is only as good as what goes in. Like every computer program, whatever goes in comes out the other end. You know, it's like these models that they make, and they say, well, it looks as though if we're not careful, we will expand the temperature of the Earth by 2 degrees, and that will mean that sea levels will rise by 7 feet around the country and around the world. And you go, well, how did you get to that point in time? And you go, well, because we input this information, and that's what it said it would do. Yeah, but, you know, it's a theory, isn't it? Well, yes. Well, yeah, but so where are the facts? Well, it's a projection. Yeah, but that doesn't mean it's going to happen, does it? Well, not really. And, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, we've practised some things here with AI just as a matter of interest to see what they would do. And if, for example, you want to find out who's going to win the 3:30 Utoxeter, right, and you put it into the AI chatbot and have them predict what's likely to happen, all it does is it looks at all of the other predictions that have been made in all the other betting sites and in all the other newspaper betting columns, and it puts them all together and makes a kind of amalgam of them. And if more people recommend one horse than another horse, then they recommend that. But it's no more accurate than any other predictor, and that's the point. That's really the problem. Let's talk about Rachel Reeves, though, and AI, because here... here it says, one from Mike, the talk of AI being used to identify potholes is ludicrously redundant. If once identified the potholes are not repaired by local authorities due to cost implications, you may as well have a man in a van driving around looking for potholes. It's a lot cheaper than Starmer's road care nightmare drama. Well, let's hear from Keir Starmer, because he wants to give away some peace prizes. Check this out.
And as well as Matt, I'm delighted that the inspiring Nobel Peace Nobel Prize winner...
Nobel Peace Prize. Fixing the foundations. Why can't he speak? Let's talk to Annabel Denham, Deputy Commentator at Telegraph. Annabel, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
I mean, I don't think I've ever known a Prime Minister to be so useless at public speaking. He can't seem to get the words right. He can't seem to get the words out. You know, we remember the releasing the sausages, which was very bizarre. Now, today, he's got mobile peace prizes, which somebody suggested to me you'd only get if you had your Nokia on silent. It's just bizarre, isn't it?
It is bizarre. It's not his inability to articulate from time to time, but rather his more general, extremely dour, expressionless delivery. I struggle to think of a Prime Minister in recent history who I've felt less inspired by when they've been public speaking. I did hear last year that part of the reason why he invested thousands of pounds in various pairs of spectacles was to give his face some intrigue and some interest, because was so motionless. And I do think that that's a problem when the economy is taking a nosedive, when there's this sense of malaise over what is happening to British society. You need a politician, a leader who is going to unite the country and take them with him. And unfortunately, we don't have that in Keir Starmer.
By the way. And that's the problem, isn't it? Because, you know, here we have, I mean, we saw John Rentoul earlier. I mean, he named 4 ministers above Rachel Reeves that he thinks should be probably fired before she is, you know, which tells you what a bad place the government is in. You know, you've got Tulip Siddiq, who's up to her neck in a corruption probe from Bangladesh, thanks to her auntie, who was run out of town, basically, for being a corrupt leader. You've got people who don't seem to know what they're doing in all manner of different places. Ed Miliband is being described as out of control. He's got his net zero kind of revolution coming, and he doesn't care about whether or not it's a threat to national security. He keeps boasting about how wind energy is going to be the top way to get energy into this country, even though our electricity bills are higher than they've ever been. You know, he's in charge of what can only be described as a clattering train, isn't he?
He is, Mike, but the question is, who would you replace them with? And of course, in the parliamentary tea rooms, it's rumoured that Labour MPs are starting to speculate about Rachel Reeves' future and who might be the next Chancellor of the Exchequer, and Pat McFadden seems to be the favourite at this stage. But there does seem to just be a dearth of talent in the upper ranks of the Labour Party, and perhaps no real pipeline of talent coming in at the more junior end. You're right to pull out Ed Miliband. The man is a credulous believer in climate alarmism. He's a complete fanatic who seems to think the economy comes behind the UK supposedly leading the world on climate change. You've mentioned Tulip Siddiq. There's also David Lammy. Let's not forget that Keir Starmer a few months ago was forced to convince us all that David Lammy would indeed be in post just a few years from now, by the time of the next general election, because of his various blunders, not least previous remarks about Donald Trump, the president-elect. There's also Angela Rayner, somebody who is on the left of the party, who I think is going to wreak terrible damage on the UK economy. Yes, if she can push through some of the housing reforms that she's promising, and we get planning liberalisation, and we finally get spades in the ground and we build more homes, well, that would be enormous progress on the previous Conservative administration. But look at what she is doing with trade unions, the way she's strengthening. Look at what she's doing with the employment rights bill. You had the chief of the CBI warning just this week that Labour need to delay imposing that legislation because businesses simply aren't going to be able to cope with it, and they'll be sacking staff before it comes into effect. You know, across the cabinet, there are so many individuals who are dogmatic, who are far to the left, and who are going to be extremely harmful to the country.
Well, only today we've got the Times writing about this ludicrous notion that the workers' employment rights scenario is going to mean that pubs might ban you from talking about certain things, and restaurants might do the same, in case you upset the waiters and the waitresses and the bartenders and the people who are serving you the drinks and the food. You know, you can't talk about transgender rights. You might not be able to talk about religious beliefs. You know, you might not be able to talk about Keir Starmer. I mean, it's like living in some kind of Orwellian nightmare, isn't it?
Yes, it's a complete assault on free speech. Look, Mike, a couple of decades ago, we lost the battle when it came to employees taking on vicarious liability for the actions of employers, taking on vicarious liability for the actions of their employees, which meant that if an employee behaved badly towards another employee, then the harmed party could potentially take their bosses to court and get a payout. And that was one thing, and most people supported it. But now we're taking this even further, such that we're going to expect employers to protect, to shield their staff from the behaviour of customers. And if they fail to do so, then the employee could potentially sue their employer. Now, this is just ridiculous. And as you say, it's a threat to freedom of expression. But imagine how much people could exploit it. You'd ask your friend's sister to come into your place of work and start hurling abuse your way in order that you could subsequently take your employer to court and get some sort of payout. So this actually was floated a couple of years ago and blocked by the House of Lords. And I'm disappointed to see that this idea is rearing its ugly head again.
I know, extraordinary. And David Lammy, meanwhile, is over in the Middle East, and he's upsetting the Israelis again by meeting with UNRWA, who are now even though we're now giving them money, giving them British taxpayers' money, recognised by many countries in the world as complicit with Hamas, certainly having had members of their own organisation taking part in the October the 7th massacre, having had them kicked out of that organisation. The Israelis are very clear that UNRWA is not part of the right side of history here. They're part of the bad guys. And he's also been meeting with Mohammed Abbas in Palestine, and just, doing things which would appear to suggest that the British government is not wholly in support of Israel. He also said, I'm amazed he even went there, he also said that he would have Benjamin Netanyahu arrested if he came to Britain.
Well, Israel is one of our long-standing allies, Mike, and it is surrounded by a ring of fire, countries that wish to do it harm, terrorist proxies, mostly, which are the puppets of the Iranian regime. And I think that, you can debate Israel's pursuit of the conflict in Gaza, and certainly it's come under. It had certain allegations levelled against it, but it would vehemently deny some of those. And its survival is contingent on continuing support from the West. At the same time as you've got David Lammy meeting with UNRWA, of course, you have Joe Biden pushing for a ceasefire in his final hours as president of the US, which sort of feels like a very fitting epitaph to 4 years of pretty disastrous foreign policy under President Biden, which has ultimately seen them pursue a strategy of appeasement towards Iran, a country which wishes to do us harm.
Yes. And the other two big stories, which we haven't even touched upon yet, the grooming gangs inquiry, still something that many people in Labour want him to do something about, but they've been sort of barred from voting for it. But we've got one Labour MP now, and Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Manchester, urging for it to happen. And of course, the immigration problems, small boats. He's seeing the Prime Minister of Iraq this morning, which is supposedly going to lead to us being able to send more people back, but I'm not sure that will work. There's so many issues that Keir Starmer's battling on all fronts with that he can't be enjoying the job, and, a lot of people don't think he'll last the pace.
Well, I think he's going to go the distance, but it's dawning, among the Labour ranks that they may not win the next general election. And let's not forget, in the run-up to the election last year, Keir Starmer kept talking about his 10-year plans for Britain. He was talking about investment in public infrastructure over the long term. He very much saw himself as having a sort of Blair-style rule that would go on across multiple elections. And, I think that is looking like an ever more distant prospect for the Prime Minister. On the grooming gangs, it's interesting to see it hasn't really taken long for some figures in the Labour Party to break ranks and come out and say, no, actually what we do need is a national inquiry. Let's see whether Keir Starmer accuses them, as he did the Conservatives, of jumping on a far-right bandwagon. Had Keir Starmer announced a national inquiry into this appalling scandal a couple of weeks ago, then that would be beginning to get underway, and he would be able to focus on some of the other fires that he's needing to put out at the moment. But instead, this is another controversy, it's another scandal that is running on and on and on. And Keir Starmer looks like he's powerless to do anything about it.
He really does look powerless and rudderless and clueless. Apart from anything else, apart from that, it's all going brilliantly. Annabelle, great to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Annabelle Denham, Deputy Comment Editor from The Telegraph, there with her thoughts on the state of play right now. Ernie says this, morning, Mike, the first thing AI will say when Starmer enables it is we need a new leader. This one is flawed. And Paul in Hertfordshire says, Mike, will the Iraqi Prime Minister refuse to leave number 10, pitch a tent in the garden and claim asylum? I don't know. I bet he'd get it if he wanted to. And one from Katie who says, Mike, talking of NHS waste, I've tried to return crutches following a bad fall. They don't want them back. Imagine how many pairs of crutches each day that amounts up to, especially after the slips and falls that must have happened over the past week. Also, whenever my very elderly mother comes out from one of their many hospital stays, she always has a pair of good quality thermal socks. Again, they don't want them back. She's got 13 pairs now. Maybe she should sell them on eBay. I mean, it is mad, isn't it? Let's get a voice note from Tony.
Morning, Mike. Great show as usual. If you remember rightly, Keir Starmer said the same thing about Sue Gray. How wonderful she was. How she was staying. How she wasn't going. Bye, Sue. Bye, Rach.
Bye, Rach. See you later. Back to accounts. Go on. We're going to organise a Christmas party for the accounts department. Dave says in Bristol, the AI expert said the technology will do the donkey work far more quickly, leaving the job holder to do the creative work. If this stuff is clever and able to learn how long he think that situation will last, and the machines will gradually become more adept at creativity too. Yeah, but they're not there yet. What we don't have is AI machines that can actually learn. They don't have AI machines or AI software that can do anything other than repeat back to you what you've put into it. And that is the flaw, it seems to me, in the ointment, or even a fly in the ointment. Or you can have a flawed in the ointment if you want. James Ball's coming up. He's going to tell us what tech firms are going to do to mine NHS archives, because that is what a lot of people worry about. Their personal data, personal health data, secrets about what their health is like, going to insurance companies, going to financial companies, going to all manner of commercial entities who really shouldn't have any business sticking their nose into your health or your health care. We'll see. 9:20.
Yes, I really don't think the story is going away, certainly with Elon Musk pushing the story and now it's taken legs. This story's been there since 2011, 2012. It's never really gone away and there's been lots of convictions. But I certainly, think that it needs to be, in terms of policing, if the lower ranks have been held responsible for failures, then it's got to go up the chain. I cannot disagree with that, because it was instructions probably from higher ranks as to how to investigate.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube. YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 9:23. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10. Nicholas in Yorkshire, on the subject of freedom of speech in the pub, says all the pub landlord needs to do is write something into an employee contract along the lines of, you will be expected to work in an environment where you may hear things that you may find offensive. Do you accept? I mean, that would be mad, wouldn't it? I can see where you're going with that, and I can see why that might work, but still, wouldn't that be ridiculous? Kind of mad. I'm going for a job in a pub. Oh, but you might hear things that you don't like. Yeah, OK, fine. Well, I need you to sign this indemnity form just in case you decide you want to sue me. That's ridiculous. By the way, I just want to say thanks for something. I got a very nice calendar through the post not that long ago, and I think it came just before the end of the year. Roger Smith sent it to me from Cornwall. It's a very nice calendar of all the lovely pictures of Cornwall, so thank you very much for that. I've got it in the house, and very kind of you to send it. And lots of you sent cards as well. I haven't thanked all of you for that, so thank you for that. We enter a new year now as we go through. We're on Tuesday the 14th of January already. Hard to believe, isn't it? Let's talk to James Ball, a tech journalist, because he's going to tell us all about what AI could do for tech firms who want to mine the NHS archives. We're still sort of struggling with all this. James, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
I'm hoping you can explain things to me that nobody else has so far explained, because there's a lot of sort of theoretical talk about AI and how it can somehow generate 47 billion a year into the economy. But I'm hoping you can be a bit more specific about what it can be used for, because so far people are a bit woolly about exactly how it's going to work on people's everyday lives.
So a lot of what they want to use it for the NHS for isn't really about making the NHS better straight away. It's more that because we've got one provider for all of our healthcare, we've got this amazing trove of health data that no one else has.
Right.
You know, the US, there's loads of different hospital chains, there's insurers, there's doctors, they're all separate, they're not joined up. We've got one database that essentially has when you were born, all of your childhood kind of medical stuff, everything you've ever been prescribed, and then what happens to you through life. That's an absolutely amazing sort of potential data set for medical research. And so we've already got, at the moment, the world's biggest set of genomic data. The UK Biobank, 500,000 people gave their sort of sample and their whole genome's in there, and that's tied to NHS data. So we're really, really good if you want to do medical research or research into big populations on what affects you. And so if we're trying to attract AI companies and Starmer's going, well, what can I say we can give them that America can't give them or Europe can't give them? A really amazing set of NHS data's in there. But of course, that comes with some worries because there's pretty much nothing more private or personal than your health data, is there?
Of course. And some people say that it's all very well if it's anonymised, but can it ever be anonymised? Because presumably if you anonymise it, then you take away some of its integrity, don't you?
Exactly that. It's generally referred to as pseudonymized, which means they kind of take your name off it, but they leave the details there. And after a while, it becomes a bit identifiable, doesn't it? You know, how many people who were 38 who lived in this NHS area, then this NHS area, then this one. And so there is a big risk that data remains identifiable even if it's anonymized. There's things people can do for that. There's some very clever work by a team in Oxford to sort of restrict how data sharing works. But we have already had NHS research data and UK health research data misused. There was a scandal fairly recently where researchers found that people doing race science, people essentially quite far-right groups trying to say that some ethnic groups have much lower IQs than others, which isn't backed in research, despite what they say. They were saying they had access to this biobank data, for example, and that wasn't intentional. So you can see how this could get in the hands of bad actors. It could get in the hands of people who might look for substance abuse issues or alcohol abuse issues and use that. They do really have to think about the safety of this because public confidence in AI is not very high. People worry about this. And so if it goes wrong, people will lose trust in it and will lose the potential that could be got because there are gains to be had here. There could be financial and health benefits to this.
But the trouble is, if somebody's paying for something, you know, like a big company's buying that data for whatever purpose they're buying it for, even if it's not for a nefarious purpose, you know, it's going to be utilised in that way commercially, isn't it? Because a lot of people worry as well about their records being used for insurance purposes, for example. You know, people have said for many years now, it hasn't actually happened, as far as we know, but, you know, can you get life insurance if such and such a gene is available for you in your makeup? Is it going to be difficult for you to get, you know, a driving licence or something if they discover that there's something in your medical history which might make it difficult for you to drive? You know, that kind of thing. And so far we've avoided all of that. But it seems to me that those people advocating for why AI is a brilliant thing, they seem to be glossing over all of that.
Yes, I think they are glossing over that, and they need to not do that. I think if people see the safeguards are there in advance, people will be happy to go along with this. People like medical research, especially if they think it's trying to address concerns that worry most of us, you know, heart disease, cancer, Alzheimer's. People want to see progress on those. If you can show that you've put it in the law that this is not allowed to be used to affect life insurance prices or health insurance prices for those who go private, if people have the reassurance in advance, people will be a lot more likely to accept it. When people just kind of see, well, I didn't really vote for Palantir, you know, the US tech company, to get access to my medical records, that's what makes people worry a lot about this, and that will really damage the buy-in, and that will make it less likely to succeed. So for all that sort of the government seems to want to rush on this, getting the safeguards in first is crucial if the public are going to back it.
Yeah, I think that's right. James, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. James Ball, tech journalist there, with the pitfalls, perhaps, of what some of this data mining might reveal. And who does what with it as well, of course, is quite important too. Let's talk to Gareth Davis, Shadow Financial Secretary to the Treasury. He's joining us now from Westminster down on... I thought he was going to be on College Green, but he's not. Gareth, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
So, let's talk about a bit of the AI announcement yesterday from Keir Starmer. They seem to be very keen on all of this, but there wasn't much in what he said, was there, which sort of could leave us to know what it is that he wants to do with it.
Yeah, there's a running theme there, I think, Mike, isn't there? I think, look, the bottom line is AI does present us as a country and companies a great opportunity to become more efficient and to grow the economy. But yet again, from this Labour government, they had a whole day talking about AI when the markets are imploding and clearly investor confidence is going through the floor. You know, Rachel Reeves has just got back from China, fled the country as markets were in turmoil. I'm not entirely sure I would have done a whole day on AI given everything that's going on and how much people are paying. But look, on AI, I think it's important that we harness the opportunities and mitigate the risks and ensure that we are investing in companies that are driving this technology forward. I'll remind you, one of the first things Labour did when they got into office on AI was they cancelled the 1.3 billion supercomputer, which would have turbocharged our efforts. And so, you know, they're saying one thing and doing another yet again.
Yeah, well, that comes as no surprise to us, does it? I mean, we've also got this ludicrous story on the front page of the Times today where Angela Rayner's kind of workers' rights bill could result in pubs and restaurants and places where there are, you know, hospitality staff clamping down on what you're allowed to talk about in case they get offended.
Yeah, unbelievable. I mean, look, we believe in free speech, right? And we're a country that has, you know, survived hundreds and hundreds of years based on the freedom of our people and our freedom of our expression and thought. And we're seeing yet again a socialist government try and clamp down on that. And I think that's wrong. You would never get that from us as Conservatives.
No. I mean, it may well be that it doesn't actually come to fruition, but it kind of raises the issue that Labour seems to represent some people in this country, but they don't represent all the people in this country because they clearly don't like people that run businesses. They clearly don't like companies that make money. They clearly don't like entrepreneurs. You know, they're punishing people on every level who run hospitality. You know, what are they playing at?
Yeah, hospitality in particular is being hit really hard on this. And UK Hospitality, the industry body, have been clear that, you know, pubs are going to close as a result of this and high streets are going to suffer. You know, I'll remind you, inflation's now going up. Growth is obviously projected to go down, but it's the tax bill that's soaring under this Labour government. They said they wouldn't increase national insurance. That's going up. But also they've they've reduced like reliefs on business rates for high street businesses and hospitality businesses. And so it's ultimately the workers and local economies like in Grantham, they're going to suffer as a result of this. And that's why we're calling on Rachel Reeves to, first of all, stay in this country. Don't flee off and fly around the world when markets are in turmoil. Stay here, reassure markets, and change course urgently, because this is going to hurt us all. I mean, the borrowing costs now, Mike, are going up so high that the interest rates are going to have to stay higher for longer. Mortgage rates are going to become more expensive for households all over the country. It's just a really bad situation. That's why Keir Starmer, I think, struggled yesterday to come out straight away and say, yeah, I've got full confidence that she's going to be my Chancellor for the whole Parliament. He had to then scramble later on in the day. This is a really difficult position for the Chancellor because of her own choices.
Yes, exactly right. She's certainly made her own bed and she's now lying in it. Good to talk to you. Gareth Davis, thank you very much indeed, Shadow Financial Secretary to the Treasury. Let's get a voice note from Simon.
Good morning, Mike. AI could run the government based on an algorithmic opinion based on the British people. Keir Starmer could turn around and ask GPT, ChatGPT, does the British people want me to stop the winter fuel allowance? Answer, no. Does the British people want me to send £11 billion abroad? Answer, no. Does the British people want me to spend £22 billion on carbon capture? Answer, no. Does the British people want me to go away? Answer, yes.
Absolutely right. Very well said, Simon. And pretty good impression as well. Not bad at all. The Mobile Peace Prize goes to you today, Simon. Mike, when AI takes over the civil service, a lot of the private sector, marketing, education, etc., how do we find the money to support the millions of highly paid non-workers to live, says Mike in Whitney. Surely we can't just finance people who've lost their jobs to AI forever. The world population is growing and the jobs are shrinking. It's very scary. Bob in Chiswick says, Mike, AI is a race to the bottom. When Rohit, our earlier guest, says reskilling, what he means is do all the menial jobs like putting the staples in so that a cheaper robot with AI can do the job. We will all end up being out of work. And Jackie says, all this talk of AI is a con. Decades ago, we were told that computers would give everyone more leisure time, etc. Surely AI is another term for progress in computing, another way of pulling the wool over our eyes. Very much so. Coming up, we're going to be talking to Maggie Oliver. She's got plenty to say about the grooming gangs inquiry. We spoke to her last week. She wants there to be an inquiry. Now Andy Burnham agrees with her, and two Labour MPs are now on side as well. Let's see what she makes of that. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 9:38. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 when Julie Hartley-Brewer will be taking over. Mike says, Stuart, I can't wait for the new overhearing offensive comments at work law to come in because when I hear Keir Starmer speaking on the TV, I'm grossly offended. Alan in Merseyside says AI has been in years in the glass industry and the car industry, just to mention two. All this is not new, Starmer. Yeah, well, Starmer keeps claiming that all sorts of things are new which aren't new. This doesn't come as any great surprise since he tells lies about everything else. Let's talk to Maggie Oliver, former Detective Constable, Greater Manchester Police and campaigner and for many, many years on the grooming gangs. Maggie, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
There's a bit of movement since we last spoke, isn't there? Andy Burnham's come out in Manchester and said that he thinks there should be an inquiry. Paul Wall, Labour MP for Rochdale. Got Sarah Champion now, who's always been on side, Labour MP for Rotherham, and Dan Carden, Labour MP in Liverpool. Is the tide turning, do you think, for Keir Starmer a little bit?
What I would say, Mike, is like I said to you, I think last week, I've done that many interviews, I can't remember who I said what to. But, you know, the devil is in the detail.
Yeah.
We had the ICSA, you know, the National Independent Inquiry. It was a complete and utter whitewash when it came to the grooming gang section. So, you know, announcing a public inquiry, for me, is meaningless. I do not want another parade of senior police officers, senior social workers and council leaders who, in my opinion, are entirely responsible for having turned their backs on generations of children for, in my knowledge, 2 decades. I've been working on this for 20 years. So, you know, it's a knee-jerk reaction for me, and they're all like doing the political manoeuvring. Where are we going to sit? How much are the public going to be bothered about this? Is the spotlight going to go off it again? But there are so many factors. I want this to, if they are going to do something, we don't need more police and more social workers to say what a great job they're doing. What we need is victims, survivors, people like me, those who have been calling out the failures in our system for many, many years, and it's been falling on deaf ears. So that's where I stand on it, Mike.
Yes, absolutely right. And I think we both said last week that, you know, it needs to be a focused inquiry. It needs to be something that doesn't go on for years. It doesn't need to include all sorts of people who've got opinions. It needs to be looking at those people who allowed it to happen, surely, and to call those people to account and to make them answer questions as to why they did what they did.
Well, I know why they did what they did, because they wanted to cover up the reality of what was going on. I personally want to see criminal accountability for chief constables who have knowingly failed in their duty to protect children, and social workers. You know, for me, there has never been any excuse, and I'm saying nothing different now, you know, Mike, than I've said for the past 12 years. It's taken this amount of time for finally the surface has been scratched, and I think that's because an international spotlight has been horrified of what has been going on in our country. And I do want to say it is not just victims of grooming gangs, it's all victims of sexual crime that actually are being failed. You know, and it isn't all about a prosecution for me. It's about the way they are treated, how they are cared for. Are they given any kind of support at all? There are so many failures and gaps in our criminal justice system that I would like to see a radical overhaul of the whole system. You know, judges are not independent. Chief constables are not independent either. They are doing the bidding of the government. And, you know, you could actually say that the government in many ways are powerless, because it's the men in grey suits in the back offices that are actually pulling the strings. So, you know, I have not got anything good to say about most of them, and unfortunately that's how I truly feel, Mike.
And what do you feel about Keir Starmer's assertions that, you know, he was the one that changed the law and changed the rules and actually was responsible for getting more grooming gangs actually, you know, to court and charged and put into prison? I mean, that's what he says he did.
Well, I'm afraid that I disagree with that. He was Director of Public Prosecutions when I worked on the Rochdale case.
Yeah.
The charges that were levied at the men who were raping dozens of children on a daily basis were painfully inadequate. I repeatedly say the man who got a 13-year-old pregnant didn't even get charged with rape. He was out of prison in less than 4 years. And Keir Starmer was at the head of the CPS at that point. He put another child on the indictment as a tactical option to get her evidence into court. She didn't even know that she'd been added to the indictment. Now, in our country, from me, as a police officer, everybody is entitled to be arrested, to be cautioned, to have legal representation, even the Yorkshire Ripper. And she didn't even know until 6 months after the trial what had been said.
Right.
All those decisions, for me, lie at his door. Nazir Afzal, yes, he was the chief prosecutor, but I find it inconceivable that they did not have conversations about those decisions. So I disagree. Those decisions were, for me, painfully inadequate. They did not go nearly far enough. We didn't have deportations. We've had millions spent in legal aid with these rapists fighting to say they've got a right to a family life in this country. There are so many threads that run through this, and I know every one of them inside out, Mike. And I'm really horrified that it's dragged on for so long, and it's playing politics, a lot of this, looking at their own positions, when what we really need is cross-party honesty, action and accountability, and then we might see some changes.
And what about all those Labour MPs who didn't, I think we talked before the vote last week, who just went along with the whips, who said, please don't vote for an inquiry. They could have done that differently, couldn't they?
I think that's the problem, that we don't have openness and honesty. If they are being, it's in a way, Mike, it's similar to me in my job as a police officer. I was told senior officers make decisions and you do as you're told. And if you can't do that, you're in the wrong job. Well, I think as a country, we need to start having public servants who act in the best interests of their constituents, of the public, of victims, and they don't just do as they're told. We need to be calling out these horrendous failures when we see them, and it shouldn't be that a person has to leave the job and lose their livelihood like I did for telling the truth. We need to change the way we are running our country, and ultimately that book stops with Parliament, and I do not feel that they are representing the will of the country. They're failing so many victims and survivors whose lives have been destroyed, Mike, that it makes me really, really angry, especially when people like me or victims and survivors are being accused of being far-right extremists. We're not. We are fighting for children who have been failed for decades and trying to prevent the same abuse happening to future generations of children. And, that's where we should be focusing our energy, not political point scoring.
Yes, and grandstanding. You're absolutely right. It's been a pretty shameful week for that. Maggie, great to talk to you again. Thank you so much. I know you're a busy woman. Maggie Oliver, former Detective Constable, Greater Manchester Police, still fighting the good fight and still maintaining that Keir Starmer, when he says that he was more than efficient at bringing many of these cases to justice, she doesn't agree. She says he didn't do it when he should have done it. He did it right at the end of his tenure as the department, as the chief of the CPS, the Crown Prosecution Service. He was Director of Public Prosecutions. He could have done an awful lot more. Let's get a phone call from Stephen, who's in Manchester, wants to talk, I think, about AI. Stephen, very good morning to you.
How you doing, Michael? You all right?
Not
Great
bad,
show,
sir.
by the way.
Thank you. Thank you. What do you want to tell me?
Always good. Well, first of all, Maggie Oliver, all those Northern boys and girls love her, by the way.
Yeah, she's great.
Got her neck out, so
yeah, she's brilliant.
Fair dues to Maggie, and keep on chucking, Maggie. Yeah. I'm with this thing called MFT, which is I've got to have knee surgery, Mike. Right. I had a pre-op on Christmas Eve, funny enough, which is a bad day to have a pre-op.
There must have been nobody in the hospital.
I was straight in, straight out. Always get an early appointment, Michael.
Yeah.
9 o'clock.
Okay.
So I got my test results within 6 hours.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
so
good.
it's all AI sort of voluntary, that you give them permission to send you this stuff. So you sign on. It's very secure. You've got it's kind of like we've got to put a 6-digit number in by your email and all that sort of stuff.
Okay.
And whereas in the past you might have kind of waited about 2 weeks. Imagine if you've got cancer and you're waiting for results from your bloods and stuff like that. You get them in 6 hours. So AI has got a place, Michael. Definitely.
And how does AI speed up that process then, exactly?
Well, basically, because it's just all computerly generated. So you give your bloods, you do the physical stuff, and then literally, Michael, in the afternoon, I got an email saying, right, you've got some test results.
Right.
Now, way back in the past, that would have taken you about, a week, 10 days, something like that.
Because they'd have to send them to some lab or other.
Yeah, so it's really important. I mean, mine were pretty good because you get the green. So if you're in the middle of the green bar, everything's good. I had one that was outside the green in the yellow. Right. So if you're in the yellow, you've got to phone them up and say, what's this?
Right.
Something to do with white leukemic blood cells, and that was quite worrying.
Well, and then who's got that information about you? And who?
Well, I'm signed on secure. So whenever I sign on to this app, I can't just sign on it. I've got to do this 6-digit authentication thing. So there is like a double bar in getting into it, but I can see my test results, my visits, I can see everything. I have to agree to that. So you sign up for this and, you have to agree to it and that. But I just think that's absolutely fantastic.
Well, listen, if it works, great. I mean, listen, you're the first person, congratulations, Stephen, because you're the first person who's actually explained to me what AI does and why it's good about it. What's good about it? Keir Starmer couldn't do it. The AI bloke couldn't do it. The tech specialist couldn't do it. But you've just done it.
Can I talk to you about algorithms as well?
Yeah, go on.
A story that's gone under the radar, which I can't believe. I'm going to say allegedly quite a lot.
Okay.
Allegedly. Rory Campbell, Alistair Campbell's son.
Oh, yeah.
With this, I don't know. Have you read this story, Mark?
Yeah, this is the betting thing, right?
Yeah. Where you're using algorithms to work out whether a 350-ton horse is going to consent to run to its level. Now, back in 1990, Norton's Coin won the Gold Cup, 100-1.
Right.
He didn't tell Desert Orchid and Toby Tobias, which were the two best horses around at the time, that he was just going to win the Gold Cup that day. You can't use an algorithm, can you?
No.
To work out. You went to Ascot last year, didn't you? And
I did.
It was all foggy.
Yeah, it was.
And you're choosing your horses, and you're thinking, well, this is the best possible outcome for me.
Yeah.
I like him, I like the colours and all that sort of stuff, right? It doesn't kind of work out like that, does it, really?
Well, I mean, I did very well, actually, that day, but it was purely based on the names of the horses. I just quite like to look at them. I don't know much about racing, and I don't know much about form, and I don't bother sort of doing much research. I just go with what I think, and it did all right. But listen, Steve, great to talk to you. Thank you, Stephen, in Manchester, a man with much to say. And he's cracked it, hasn't he? He's told us what AI can do. You can get your bloods done and they can get the results you back an awful lot quicker. Well, that's something, isn't it? That's already something new that we didn't have just 2 hours ago. So things are looking up. It's 9:52. Coming up, we're going to be speaking to Charlie Mullins. You might know him as the former owner of Pimlico Plumbers. He's now joined Reform. We're going to find out why. This is Talk.
I mean, this is absolutely extraordinary. That is basically kind of, politics 101. This is what the press always ask a prime minister when one of his cabinet ministers or even a junior minister is in trouble. They will basically say one of two things. Do you have full confidence in that minister? To which the only answer, if you do, is yes. And if you don't, then you can come up with a form of words, and that is the code to the media that basically that person's on their way out.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to A Morning Glory. It's 5 minutes to 10. Coming up, Julie Hartley-Brewer, of course, from 10 to 1. She'll be in to tell us what's coming up on her show. Let's talk to Charlie Mullins, who's running to be a Reform UK candidate. Former owner of Pimlico Plumbers, of course, now runs We Fix, I believe it's called. Charlie, very good morning to you. Welcome.
Sorry, Mike.
How's it going?
Yeah, all very good, mate. Yes,
well, listen, I don't know where you are, but it's not going very well here. We're getting run into the ground by Rachel Thieves and Keir Farmer Sama Harmer, who's not doing a great job. You're thinking of becoming an MP, I hear.
Well, that's right. We're going to start off with a local councillor and see where it goes from there. I've been asked if I'd like to do it by Nigel, and why not anything to get Labour out and get Reform in, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, we hear, though, that in May, I don't know if you're talking about running in May, there's a lot of elections that might not actually happen because they're trying to rearrange all the boroughs and the local councils into different groups and different kind of regions. Do you know yet where you might be heading, which area?
It will be local. The area I know, either Lambeth, Bermondsey, Chelsea, Kensington, them areas, Fulham, something like that, the areas I know and know the people.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, fairly local to where I live. I live in Westminster.
Yeah.
And, something local there.
Now, a couple of people that said, when I said you were coming on, have said to me, I thought he'd moved away. I thought he was living in Spain. Are you still living here then?
No, I'm living in Spain. I mean, because you can get on a plane and come back. It's quite easy.
Yeah.
But I've just come back from Dubai, I think, on Sunday.
Yeah.
I'm here for about a week, various interviews, and then back to Spain. But obviously, things have changed now. I'll relook at my residency, and, if I need to be living here, I'll be living here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, a man of your means, Charlie, you can live where you like, can't you? It says here in the Telegraph as well that Britons are facing 100% tax on their properties in Spain, so you might want to get the hell out before they start taking all your money.
Well, no, I didn't move to Spain to avoid tax or save on tax. I've got no tax to pay. I just, don't want to be contributing to, the money that for the Conservatives, not Conservatives, for the what kind of thing? It was in Labour to waste. So that's what it was, and other things obviously. But that's changed in a sense because it's now looking like Reform are going to be in with a great chance of being into number 10 and probably a lot earlier than what we think.
Yeah, I think you may well be right. Well, we'll wish you a lot of luck. We'll talk to you again soon, I'm sure, because we've run out of time this morning. But thank you very much, Charlie, for taking the time to talk to us. Charlie Mullins there wants to run for Reform as a councillor. Who knows whether there's any council elections happening? I can't find anyone that can tell me. Julie Hartley-Brewer's here. Do you know?
There are council elections.
Are they going to be?
In most of the country.
Because they've cancelled them already in Sussex, as far as I understand. Because they're rearranging.
Council. It's a local council. Mostly they're Tory. They have to agree to it happening.
Yeah.
But there's no point having two sets of local elections. I'm not in a fuss about this big sort of, 'tis of democracy. I mean, hey, where were all these people complaining when we had council elections come
I'm not particularly
off in 2021?
Yeah, I'm not particularly fussed about it. I just don't know what's happening. Because nobody can explain it to me.
Because they don't know.
It's a bit like AI. Every time you ask somebody...
Oh, God, that AI speech yesterday.
Oh, my God. Absolutely ridiculous.
I mean, all absolutely nothing. Also, you're not going to have big AI movement here because energy costs are so high.
Right.
It's just that simple.
Also,
every single thing the government says they're going to do with another policy, they undermine it at the same time, which is